When the CEO fell in love with her employee, she thought she could control it. She was wrong. Aurora Steele built her empire on iron will and ruthless discipline. At 32, she was the youngest CEO in Luminary Creative's history. Untouchable, unshakable, uncompromising. Then Ethan Cole walked into her office with a portfolio that took her breath away and a 5-year-old daughter who would eventually steal her heart. What started with a champagne-blurred almost kiss at a company gala became the one thing Aurora couldn't control. Love that threatened everything she'd fought to build. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey reaches. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aurora Steele's corner office like accusatory fingers, each drop a reminder that control was an illusion she'd been selling herself for years. She stood with her arms crossed, watching the city lights blur through the downpour, and wondered when exactly she'd lost her grip on the carefully constructed walls she'd spent a lifetime building. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Most of the office had emptied hours ago, leaving behind the ghost town quiet that Aurora had always preferred. In silence, there were no questions she couldn't answer, no vulnerabilities she had to hide. But tonight, the silence felt different. It felt like anticipation. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant, Margot. Left the Henderson files on your desk. Get some sleep, boss. You're human too, allegedly. Aurora's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Human. The word felt foreign, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak somewhere between foster home number 4 and her first boardroom victory. She was reaching for her coat when she heard it, the soft ping of the elevator, the quiet footsteps in the hallway. Aurora glanced at her watch. No one should be here. Security made rounds at 10. The footsteps stopped outside her door. "It's open," she called, her voice carrying that particular edge of authority that had made grown men stumble over their presentations. The door swung inward, and Ethan Cole stepped into her office, looking like he'd just run through the storm outside. His dark hair was wet, plastered to his forehead. Water dripped from his jacket onto her pristine floor. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark brown, intense, filled with something that made Aurora's carefully maintained composure falter. "We need to talk," he said. Aurora raised an eyebrow, falling back on the armor of professionalism like a warrior reaching for a familiar weapon. "It's almost 10 o'clock, Mr. Cole. Whatever this is could wait until morning." "No," Ethan said quietly, closing the door behind him. "It really couldn't." 6 months earlier, the portfolio had arrived on a Tuesday morning, unremarkable in its manila envelope sleeve, extraordinary in its contents. Aurora had been reviewing budget projections, her third coffee of the morning growing cold at her elbow, when Margot placed it on her desk with a knowing look. "This one's different," Margot had said. "Trust me." Aurora didn't trust easily. Not people, not instincts, not anything that couldn't be quantified in a spreadsheet. But she opened the portfolio anyway, and within 3 pages she understood what Margot meant. The work was raw, honest, devastating in its emotional clarity. A series of conceptual designs for a grief counseling center that somehow managed to capture hope and heartbreak in equal measure. Each layout told a story, and Aurora found herself leaning closer, studying the details. A waiting room with walls painted the color of dawn. A children's space with windows positioned to catch the light just so, making it feel like possibility lived there. At the bottom of the last page, a small signature. Ethan Cole. Freelance. Single father. Available immediately. "Get him in here," Aurora had told Margot. "Today." Ethan had arrived at 2 p.m., and Aurora's first thought was that he looked tired. Not sloppy or unprofessional, his shirt was pressed, his portfolio case well maintained. But there was an exhaustion in his eyes that she recognized, the kind that came from carrying weight no one else could see. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with the kind of quiet strength that didn't announce itself. Dark hair, strong jawline, hands that looked equally comfortable holding a pencil or a child. Aurora noticed these things the way she noticed everything, cataloging details, assessing value, maintaining distance. "Mr. Cole," she'd said, extending her hand across the desk. "Your work is impressive." His handshake was firm, warm. "Thank you, Ms. Steele. I appreciate you seeing me on short notice." "Aurora," she'd corrected automatically, then wondered why. She never invited employees to use her first name during interviews. They talked for an hour. Aurora learned that Ethan had worked for 3 major firms before going freelance 2 years ago, that he specialized in spaces designed for healing and community, that he had a degree from Rhode Island School of Design and a portfolio that had won regional awards. What he didn't say, but what Aurora pieced together from the careful gaps in his resume, was that something had broken his trajectory. Some personal catastrophe that had sent him from the trajectory of senior designer to freelance work done in the margins of someone else's life. "I'll be honest, Mr. Cole," Aurora had said, leaning back in her chair. "You're overqualified for the position I'm offering. The salary is probably less than what you made freelancing. The hours will be demanding. I expect excellence, not excuses. Why should I believe you won't leave the moment something better comes along?" Ethan had met her gaze directly. "Because I need stability more than I need prestige. I have a 5-year-old daughter who needs to know that when I say I'll be somewhere, I'll be there. I can't promise that as a freelancer juggling multiple clients, but I can promise it here, if you'll give me the chance." Something in Aurora's chest had tightened. She'd spent her whole life proving she didn't need anyone's chance, fighting for every opportunity with tooth and nail. The vulnerability in Ethan's honesty unsettled her. "You're hired," she'd said. "Start Monday. Don't make me regret it." He hadn't. The first 3 months had been professionally perfect. Ethan arrived early, stayed late when projects demanded it, and delivered work that exceeded every expectation. He was quiet, but not withdrawn, collaborative, but not needy, talented, but not arrogant. He fit into the creative team like he'd always been there. Aurora watched him the way she watched all her employees, with the clinical assessment of someone measuring return on investment. But sometimes she caught herself watching longer than necessary. The way he listened when junior designers pitched ideas, giving them his full attention. The way he'd roll up his sleeves and sketch alongside the team rather than delegating from above. The way he'd check his phone precisely at 5:30 every day, and his whole face would soften when he looked at whatever message waited there. His daughter, Margot had explained one afternoon, catching Aurora's curious glance. "Chloe. He picks her up from aftercare every day at 6. Never late. Not once." Aurora had nodded, filing this information away in the category of things that explained Ethan Cole, but didn't affect her professionally. She was good at categories, good at compartments, good at keeping her life organized into manageable sections that never bled into each other. Until the gala. Luminary Creative's annual charity gala was the kind of event Aurora had learned to navigate with practiced ease. Smile at the donors, make small talk with the board members, deliver a speech that inspired without revealing anything real, wear something expensive but not flashy, drink champagne slowly enough to maintain control. She'd been doing exactly that, working the room in a black dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, when she'd spotted Ethan across the ballroom. He looked different in a suit. Not uncomfortable, he wore it well, but like he was playing a part. His tie was slightly loosened, his expression somewhere between polite interest and careful observation as he listened to Richard Chen from accounting explain something with enthusiastic hand gestures. Aurora had meant to simply acknowledge him with a professional nod. Instead, she found herself crossing the room. "Mr. Cole," she'd said, "I didn't know you were attending tonight." Ethan had turned and something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure. "Ms. Steele, I wasn't planning to, but the team insisted. Apparently, skipping the gala in your first year is career suicide." "They're not wrong," Aurora had replied, accepting a fresh glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Her third, or fourth, she'd lost count. "Though I'd never hold it against someone who values their Friday evening sanity over forced networking." "Is that what you're doing, valuing your sanity?" "I'm maintaining appearances. It's different." Ethan's smile had been small but genuine. "Sounds exhausting." "It is." The honesty had slipped out before Aurora could stop it. She'd blamed the champagne, but later she'd wonder if maybe she'd just been tired of performing, tired of being Aurora Steele, CEO. Tired of being the woman who had clawed her way up from nothing and couldn't afford to show weakness. They talked for 20 minutes, then 40, then an hour. Somehow, they'd migrated from the crowded ballroom to a quieter corner near the terrace doors. Aurora had lost track of the donors she should be charming, the board members she should be impressing. All she could focus on was the way Ethan listened, really listened, like her words mattered beyond their strategic value. "Why did you start Luminary?" he'd asked at some point, his voice soft under the distant sound of orchestral music. "Because I was tired of working for people who couldn't see what I could build," Aurora had said. The champagne had made her bold, reckless. "Because I spent my childhood in foster homes where no one believed I'd amount to anything. Because I wanted to prove that where you come from doesn't determine where you go." Ethan had nodded slowly. "My wife used to say something similar, that the past is just prologue, not prison." "Used to?" "She died. Car accident 2 years ago." His voice had been steady, but Aurora had seen the pain flash across his face like lightning. "Chloe was 3. I was 31, and suddenly I was a single father trying to figure out how to explain why Mommy wasn't coming home." "I'm sorry," Aurora had whispered, and meant it with an intensity that surprised her. "Me too." They'd stood there in silence, two people carrying weights they rarely set down, and Aurora had felt something shift. Some wall she'd built cracking just enough to let in light. That's when she'd made the mistake. She'd reached up, her hand finding the side of Ethan's face, and leaned in. She'd been close enough to feel his breath, to see the surprise in his eyes, to know that in another second she'd cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Ethan's hand had caught her wrist gently, stopping her. "Aurora," he'd said quietly, "you're drunk. I'm not. You are. And you're my boss. And tomorrow morning you're going to regret this." The words had been soft but firm, delivered with a kindness that somehow made them hurt more. Aurora had pulled back, embarrassment flooding through her like ice water. I need to... Wait. Ethan's voice had stopped her. When she'd looked back, his expression was serious, intense. "If you were sober, I'd make the first move, just so you know." Then he'd walked away, leaving Aurora standing alone with her heart pounding and her carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. The next morning had been agony. Aurora had woken with a champagne headache and a crystal-clear memory of her near disaster. She'd spent the early hours drafting and deleting 17 different emails to Ethan before finally settling on "My office, 9 a.m. We need to discuss last night." He'd arrived exactly on time, looking composed in dark jeans and a gray sweater. Aurora had been behind her desk, armor firmly in place, every hair perfect, every word rehearsed. "Mr. Colt..." "Ethan," he'd interrupted gently. "If we're going to talk about last night, let's at least be honest enough to use first names." Aurora had nodded stiffly. "Ethan, what happened last night was completely inappropriate. I was unprofessional and I put you in an uncomfortable position. It won't happen again." "Aurora..." "I'm not finished." She'd stood, pacing to the window. "You're a valuable member of this team. I don't want my error in judgment to impact your position here. If you're uncomfortable working directly with me, we can arrange for you to report to Marcus instead. If you'd prefer to transfer to another department, I don't want to transfer. Or if you need time to consider your options, Aurora." Ethan's voice had been firm enough to stop her mid-sentence. "I don't want to transfer. I don't want to change departments. I want to stay right where I am." She'd turned to look at him. "Why?" "Because I love this job. Because the work we're doing matters. And because..." He'd paused, running a hand through his hair. "Because what you said last night, about proving that where you come from doesn't determine where you go? That matters to me too. I came from a place where my wife was supposed to grow old with me, where I had a plan and a future that made sense. And then she died. And everything fell apart. And I had to rebuild from pieces I didn't recognize anymore." Aurora had felt her throat tighten. "This job," Ethan had continued, "this team, the work we're doing, it's part of that rebuilding. I'm not going to let one awkward moment take that away from either of us." "It can't happen again," Aurora had said quietly. "I know. We need boundaries." "Agreed. Professional distance, no more late-night conversations, no more honesty?" Ethan had asked, and there'd been something sad in his smile. I think that might be harder than you think. He'd been right. The boundaries had lasted approximately 2 weeks. Not because either of them broke them deliberately, but because their work didn't allow for distance. Ethan was too talented, too essential to the projects Aurora cared about most. And Aurora was too hands-on, too invested in excellence to delegate and disappear. So they'd found a different kind of distance. Professional courtesy instead of warmth. Emails instead of conversations. Meetings with other people present, instead of the easy collaboration they'd started to develop. It was perfectly sustainable and absolutely miserable. "You two are being ridiculous," Margot had announced one afternoon, barging into Aurora's office with the kind of blunt affection that came from 5 years of working together. "Just talk to the man like a human being. You're making everyone uncomfortable with this weird Cold War thing." "There's no Cold War," Aurora had said without looking up from her laptop. "You literally scheduled a meeting via calendar invite to discuss a project you could have walked 15 feet to talk to him about. That's called professional efficiency. That's called being a coward." Aurora's fingers had frozen over her keyboard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Margot had crossed her arms, settling into what Aurora privately called her Brooklyn stance. Feet planted, chin up, ready for battle. "I've watched you negotiate with venture capitalists who wanted to eat you alive. I've seen you stare down board members twice your age who thought you were too young, too female, too ambitious. You don't scare easily, boss, so whatever's going on with Ethan Cole has you spooked, and that's interesting." "There's nothing going on with Ethan." "I didn't say there was, but there could be, and that's what has you hiding behind calendar invites and CCing 6 people on every email. That's inappropriate speculation about what? About the fact that you're both single adults who clearly enjoy each other's company? About the fact that he looks at you like you hung the moon, and you look at him like you're trying to solve a puzzle you're not sure you want the answer to?" Aurora had stood abruptly. "This conversation is over." "Fine. But boss?" Margot had paused at the door. "Life's too short to let fear make all your decisions. Trust me. I watched my mom do that for 30 years, and she died with a lot of should-haves and not enough I-dids." The door had closed softly, leaving Aurora alone with thoughts she didn't want to examine too closely. The late nights had started innocently enough, a project deadline that required both of them to stay past normal hours. A complicated client request that needed Ethan's design expertise and Aurora's strategic oversight. One late night became 2, then 3, then a pattern that neither of them acknowledged but both of them anticipated. Around 8 p.m., when the office was empty except for the cleaning crew and the ambient hum of computers, they'd find themselves in Aurora's office or at the design tables in the creative space, working side by side. And somewhere around 9 p.m., one of them would order takeout. "Thai or Italian?" Ethan had asked one Thursday, his phone already open to the delivery app. "Surprise me," Aurora had said, not looking up from the mock-up spread across her desk. He'd ordered both. They'd eaten sitting on her office floor, backs against the couch, containers spread between them like an offering. "Chloe asked about you today," Ethan had said casually, twirling pad thai around his chopsticks. Aurora had paused mid-bite. "Me? Why?" "I was working on the Henderson project at home during lunch, and she saw one of your notes on the design. She can read your name now, very proud of herself. Wanted to know who Aurora was and why you were writing about her daddy's pictures. What did you tell her? That you're my boss, that you're very smart and very busy, that sometimes we work together on important projects." Accurate summary. "She asked if you were nice." Aurora had looked over at him. "And?" "I said you were." Ethan's smile had been small but warm. "I also said you were a little scary sometimes, but in a good way, like a superhero who doesn't have time for nonsense." Despite herself, Aurora had laughed. "A scary superhero, that's a new one." Chloe liked it. "She's been drawing pictures of Super Aurora all week. You wear a cape and fight bad guys with spreadsheets." The image had been so absurd, so unexpectedly charming, that Aurora had felt something crack in her chest. "I'd like to see those pictures sometime." The words had slipped out before she could stop them, before she could remember that personal interest in an employee's family life crossed boundaries they'd agreed to maintain. But Ethan had just smiled. "I'll bring one in. She'd be thrilled." They'd finished eating in comfortable silence, and Aurora had realized with some alarm that this, sitting on her office floor at 9:30 p.m., eating Thai food and talking about a 5-year-old's drawings, was the most relaxed she'd felt in months. Maybe years. That should have terrified her more than it did. The shift happened gradually, like ice melting in spring, so subtle you didn't notice until you were standing in water. Ethan started bringing coffee to their late-night work sessions. Not expensive fancy coffee, but the kind from the diner 3 blocks away that tasted like it had been sitting on a burner since morning and somehow was exactly what Aurora needed. Aurora started asking about Chloe, not prying, just interested. How was kindergarten going? What was her current favorite book? Did she still think Aurora fought bad guys with spreadsheets? They talked about work, mostly. Projects and clients and the 1,000 small decisions that went into running a creative agency. But sometimes in the quiet hours when the city outside had settled into its midnight rhythm, they talked about other things. Ethan told her about his wife, Melissa, how they'd met in college, how she'd been the brave one, the dreamer, the person who believed in possibility when Ethan had been content to play it safe. How losing her had felt like losing his roadmap, his future tense, his ability to imagine tomorrow. Aurora told him about the foster homes. Not all of it. Some wounds were too deep to show even to people you trusted. But enough. The constant moving. The feeling of being temporary, disposable, not quite worth keeping. The way she'd learned to be perfect because perfect children got adopted, except it turned out that wasn't true either. "Is that why you built this?" Ethan had asked one night, gesturing to the office, the company, the empire Aurora had constructed. "To prove you were worth keeping?" "Maybe," Aurora had admitted, "or maybe to prove I didn't need to be kept, that I could build something stable enough to stand on my own. You can do both, you know, be strong and let people in. Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're pretty good at the strong part and not so great at the letting people in part." Ethan had smiled, conceding the point. Touché. They'd looked at each other across the scattered takeout containers and project files, 2 people who'd learned to protect themselves so well they'd forgotten how to be vulnerable, and Aurora had felt it again, that pull, that dangerous warmth that made her want to lean closer. She'd stood abruptly instead. "It's late. You should go home." "Aurora, thank you for your help tonight. I'll see you tomorrow." She'd retreated behind her desk, behind her professional distance, behind every wall she'd ever built. Ethan had gathered his things quietly and left without another word. But the next night, when they both ended up working late again, he'd brought coffee from the diner. Aurora had accepted it without comment. The boundaries were crumbling, and they both knew it. Neither of them knew how to stop it. Miranda Hale noticed first. She was the kind of woman who made noticing her business. Ambitious, calculating, always watching for opportunities to advance her position. At 38, she'd been with Luminary Creative for 6 years, quietly resenting every moment that Aurora Steele, 8 years her junior, held the position Miranda believed should have been hers. She started paying attention to the late nights. The way Aurora's office lights were still on at 9, 10, sometimes 11 p.m., and Ethan Cole's car was always in the parking garage during those hours. She noticed the coffee runs, the way Ethan would return from lunch with 2 cups instead of 1, and one would end up on Aurora's desk. She noticed the body language, the way they stood just slightly too close during team meetings. The way Aurora's professional mask would slip for just a moment when Ethan presented an idea, revealing something that looked dangerously like pride. Miranda started keeping notes, not because she had a specific plan, but because information was currency, and she'd learned long ago that the right piece of information deployed at the right moment could change everything. She watched and waited, patient as a snake, for the perfect opportunity to strike. That opportunity came on a random Tuesday afternoon when Miranda happened to walk past the design studio and saw something that made her pause. Ethan was at his desk, laughing at something on his phone. Not unusual, he checked in with his daughter's aftercare regularly. But what made Miranda stop was Aurora, standing behind him, leaning over to see whatever was on his screen. They were looking at a child's drawing, Miranda couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could read body language fluently. Aurora's hand on Ethan's shoulder, his upturned face, smiling, the easy intimacy of the moment, unguarded and genuine. Then Aurora had straightened, realized they weren't alone, and the professional mask had slammed back into place so fast Miranda almost felt whiplash. "Mr. Cole," Aurora had said coolly, "when you have a moment, I need to discuss the Morrison project." "Of course, Mrs. Steele." Aurora had walked away without another glance, but the damage was done. Miranda had seen what lived beneath the professional distance, had seen the thing Aurora Steele was trying so hard to hide. And Miranda Hale knew exactly how valuable that information could be. She returned to her office and began drafting an email. Not to send yet, timing was everything, but to have ready. To the board of directors. Concerns regarding CEO conduct and potential conflicts of interest. Chloe's drawing arrived on Aurora's desk the next morning. It was in a simple frame, nothing fancy, just something from a drugstore. But the care Ethan had taken in presenting it made Aurora's chest tighten. The drawing was exactly what he'd promised. A stick-figure woman in a cape, standing on top of a building made of what looked like hundreds of tiny rectangles. In Chloe's wobbly 5-year-old handwriting, a label at the bottom read, "Super Aurora. She fights bad guys with math." Aurora had stared at it for a long moment. This ridiculous, earnest, perfect thing a child she'd never met had created. "She wanted you to have it," Ethan had said quietly from the doorway. "I told her it might be too casual for your office, but she was very insistent. Said every superhero needs to remember they're super." Aurora had looked up at him. This man who was supposed to be just an employee, just a talented designer who happened to work late sometimes. Just a colleague she respected professionally and nothing more. "Thank you," she'd said. "Tell her I love it. Tell her yourself sometime." The invitation had hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and danger in equal measure. "That wouldn't be appropriate," Aurora had said automatically. "Right, of course." Ethan's expression had shuttered closed. Professional boundaries. "Ethan, no, you're right. I shouldn't have suggested it. I'll see you at the 2 o'clock meeting." He'd left before Aurora could say anything else, before she could explain that she wanted to meet Chloe more than was probably healthy, that the thought of being part of Ethan's life outside these walls terrified her precisely because she wanted it so much. She'd placed the drawing on her desk where she could see it while she worked. Margot had walked in 10 minutes later, taken one look at it, and raised her eyebrows. "So, we're displaying children's artwork now? This is new." "It's from Ethan's daughter." "I know whose kid it is, boss. Question is, why is it on your desk?" Aurora had no good answer for that. Or rather, she had several answers, none of which she was ready to say out loud. Margot had studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Just be careful, okay? I know I gave you the whole life's too short speech, but I also know this company matters to you. And people like Miranda Hale are always looking for ammunition. Miranda's all talk. Miranda's ambitious, there's a difference." Margot had headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth. I think he's good for you. I've never seen you this human. Just don't let it blow up in both your faces." The warning had settled into Aurora's stomach like a stone. The contract drop-off happened 3 weeks later, completely by accident. Ethan had needed Aurora's signature on some vendor agreements. Normally, he would have left them with Margot or waited until the next day, but the vendor needed them back by 5 p.m., and Aurora had left the office early for once, a dentist appointment she'd been rescheduling for months. "Just swing by my place," Aurora had texted. "I'll be home by 4:30. Address is 1847 Morrison Avenue, Unit 12B. It should have been simple. A quick signature, in and out, nothing personal. Except Ethan had arrived at 4:45, and Chloe had been in the car. Aftercare closed early for teacher training, he'd explained apologetically when Aurora answered the door. "I hope it's okay. She's very well behaved, I promise." Aurora had looked past him to the little girl in the back seat, dark curls and curious eyes, one hand pressed against the window. "Of course it's okay," Aurora had heard herself say. "Actually, would she like to come in? I have—" She'd racked her brain for what she might possibly have that would interest a 5-year-old. "Cookies?" The word had sounded absurd in her own ears. She didn't have cookies. She had a wine collection and a kale-stocked refrigerator and a life meticulously organized around work. But Ethan had smiled like she'd offered something precious. Are you sure? Yes, give me 2 minutes. Aurora had left Ethan and Chloe in her building's lobby and practically sprinted to the corner store. She'd returned 7 minutes later with a package of chocolate chip cookies, slightly breathless and completely bewildered by her own behavior. Chloe had been shy at first, hiding half behind Ethan's leg when Aurora opened the door to her apartment. But when she'd seen the cookies, her face had lit up. Daddy said you fight bad guys with math, Chloe had announced, clutching her prize. Can you show me? And somehow, impossibly, Aurora had found herself sitting on her living room floor with a 5-year-old using M&Ms from her emergency candy drawer to demonstrate basic addition. See? If you have 3 red ones and I give you 2 blue ones, how many do you have total? Chloe had counted carefully on her fingers. 5. Exactly. That's math. That's how we beat the bad guys, by knowing numbers. Can I eat them now? Aurora had laughed, actually laughed, and caught Ethan watching them with an expression that made her heart skip. Yes, you can eat them now. She'd signed the contracts while Chloe had munched contentedly on M and Ms. The whole visit had lasted maybe 20 minutes, but when they'd left, Aurora had stood in her empty apartment and felt the absence like a physical thing. Her phone had buzzed minutes later. A text from Ethan. Thank you. She's already telling me you're the coolest superhero she's ever met. Aurora had typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, she's wonderful. You're doing a great job. What she'd wanted to say was, bring her back. Bring yourself back. Stay. But those words were too dangerous, too revealing, too close to admitting that her carefully constructed boundaries had crumbled completely. She'd kept the package of cookies in her cupboard, unopened, like evidence of a future she wasn't brave enough to reach for. The office rumors started the next week. Nothing overt at first, just whispers in the break room, knowing glances during meetings, the kind of subtle shift in atmosphere that Aurora had spent her career learning to read. People are talking, Margot had reported, closing Aurora's office door behind her. About you and Ethan. There's nothing to talk about. I know that, you know that, but Miranda's been making comments. Nothing actionable, just little observations. How you two work late together. How invested you seem in his projects. How you lit up like a Christmas tree when someone mentioned his name in last week's creative meeting. I did not. Boss, you smiled. An actual, genuine smile in a meeting about budget allocations. People noticed. Aurora had closed her eyes, feeling the carefully structured world she'd built starting to tremble. What exactly is Miranda saying? That she's concerned about favoritism, that Ethan's gotten prime projects despite being relatively new, that the rest of the team is starting to wonder if there's a reason for his rapid advancement beyond his talent. His advancement is entirely merit-based. I believe you, but perception matters, and right now the perception is that you might be compromised. The word had hit Aurora like a slap. Compromised. As if caring about someone made you weak. As if being human was a liability. What do I need to do? She'd asked quietly. Distance. Real distance this time. No more late nights alone, no more coffee runs, definitely no more cute interactions with his kid. We work together. I can't just avoid him. You don't have to avoid him. Just treat him like any other employee. Professional courtesy, nothing more. Aurora had nodded, hating every word but knowing Margot was right. She'd built this company from nothing. She couldn't let it crumble because she'd been foolish enough to fall for an employee. Except she hadn't fallen. That would imply a sudden drop, a moment of carelessness. This had been a slow descent, step by step, choice by choice, until she'd looked up and realized she was somewhere she'd never intended to be, somewhere that felt dangerously close to happiness. The change had been immediate and brutal. Aurora had stopped scheduling late-night work sessions, had started delegating Ethan's projects to Marcus for feedback, had replied to his emails with brief, professional responses devoid of any warmth. She'd removed Chloe's drawing from her desk and stored it in her bottom drawer, out of sight but impossible to forget. Ethan had noticed. Of course he'd noticed. Did I do something wrong? He'd asked one afternoon, catching her alone in the break room. No. Why would you think that? Because 3 weeks ago we were collaborating on the Henderson project. Now I'm getting feedback through Marcus, because you won't meet my eye in team meetings, because you're treating me like a stranger. Aurora had poured coffee she didn't want, just to have something to do with her hands. I'm treating you like an employee, Ethan, which is what you are. Is that really all I am? The question had hung between them, dangerous and desperate. That's all you can be, Aurora had said quietly. I have responsibilities. The company, the board, 47 other employees who depend on me making smart decisions. I can't let personal feelings compromise my judgment. Personal feelings, Ethan had repeated softly. So you're admitting there are feelings. I'm admitting that I need to be more careful about maintaining professional boundaries. This, she gestured between them, isn't appropriate. Because you're my boss. Yes. And if you weren't, if I didn't work here? Aurora had finally looked at him, really looked at him, and seen the same longing reflected in his eyes that she felt in her chest every time he walked into a room. But I am, and you do. So it doesn't matter what if. She'd walked away before he could respond, before she could do something stupid like tell him the truth, that she thought about him constantly, that Chloe's drawing was the first thing she looked at every morning when she opened her desk drawer, that the idea of him not being in her life felt like losing something she hadn't known she needed. But wanting something didn't make it possible. Aurora had learned that lesson a long time ago, in a series of foster homes where wanting a permanent family hadn't been enough to create one. Some things just weren't meant to be, no matter how much you wished otherwise. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in professional distance. Aurora threw herself into work with an intensity that impressed even Margot. She took breakfast meetings and lunch meetings and dinner meetings, filling every hour so there was no space to think about what she was avoiding. Ethan did the same. He arrived early and stayed late, but made sure never to be alone in the office with Aurora. He delivered exceptional work and accepted her terse feedback without comment. He was perfectly, maddeningly professional. They were both miserable. This is ridiculous, Marcus had finally said during a project review meeting. You two need to just talk like adults instead of communicating through me like I'm some kind of corporate messenger pigeon. There's nothing to talk about, Aurora had said. Right, and I'm the Easter Bunny. Look, I don't know what happened, and frankly, I don't want to know. But whatever personal drama you're both pretending doesn't exist is affecting the work. The Henderson project is due in 3 weeks, and you're the creative director. Ethan's your lead designer. Either figure out how to work together, or one of you needs to step back from the project. The ultimatum had been fair and infuriating in equal measure. After the meeting, Aurora had sent Ethan a calendar invite. Henderson project discussion. My office. 5 p.m. He'd accepted without comment. They'd sat across from each other in her office, the desk between them like a demilitarized zone, and discussed layouts and timelines and client expectations with painful formality. The color palette needs adjustment, Aurora had said, reviewing his latest mock-up. What would you suggest? Something warmer. The client specifically requested. They'd worked for 90 minutes, efficient and productive and completely devoid of anything resembling human connection. When they'd finished, Ethan had gathered his materials and paused at the door. Can I ask you something? And I need you to answer honestly. Aurora had braced herself. All right. If things were different, if we'd met some other way, if I wasn't your employee, if the circumstances were different, would you give this a chance? Us? The question had stripped away all the professional distance, all the careful boundaries, leaving only truth. Yes, Aurora had whispered, in a heartbeat. Ethan had nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd already known. Okay, I just needed to know it wasn't all in my head. It's not, but that doesn't change anything. I know. He'd opened the door, then looked back. For what it's worth, I think we could have been really good together. We still can be, as colleagues. Right, colleagues. The word had tasted like ash in Aurora's mouth. The gala invitation had arrived 6 weeks before the event. Luminary Creative's annual charity gala. Black tie. Open bar. Speeches from the CEO and select board members. An opportunity to showcase the company's success and commitment to community partnership. An opportunity for everything Aurora had been carefully managing to completely fall apart. You're going, obviously, Margot had said, barely glancing up from her tablet. Of course. And Ethan? Aurora had hesitated. The gala was technically optional for employees, though strongly encouraged. But after last year's near disaster, having Ethan there felt like inviting chaos. On the other hand, excluding him specifically would raise questions. It's his choice, Aurora had said finally. Send the invitation to all staff. She'd spent the next 6 weeks alternating between hoping he wouldn't attend and being devastated by the possibility that he might not. In the end, he'd RSVP'd yes. Aurora had told herself it didn't matter. She'd give her speech, work the room, maintain perfect professional composure. She and Ethan would exchange polite greetings if their paths crossed, and that would be that. She'd been lying to herself. Because the moment Ethan had walked into the ballroom in a tailored black suit, looking uncomfortable and handsome and so heartbreakingly present, Aurora had known. Tonight was going to change everything. She just hadn't known how. And now here they were, 10 p.m. on a Thursday, Aurora's office, rain hammering the windows like judgment. "We need to talk," Ethan said again, closing the door behind him. Aurora's hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her desk to hide it. "About what?" "About the fact that we're both pretending this isn't happening. About the fact that I think about you constantly, and I'm pretty sure you think about me too. About the fact that professional boundaries are important, but so is being honest about what we feel." "Ethan, I'm in love with you." The words landed in the quiet office like bombs, destroying every careful structure Aurora had built. "You can't." "I can. I am. And I think you love me too, but you're too scared to admit it because you've spent your whole life being the person who has it all together, who doesn't need anyone, who never shows weakness." Aurora felt her carefully constructed composure cracking. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." Ethan crossed to her desk, his eyes intense. "Tell me why two people who care about each other have to pretend they don't. Tell me why being professional means being miserable. Tell me why we can't find a way to make this work." "Because I'm your boss." The words came out sharper than Aurora intended. "Because there are rules and regulations and policies designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Because if anyone finds out, and they will find out, it puts us both at risk. It puts the company at risk. It puts everything I've built at risk. So we're just supposed to ignore this? For the rest of our lives? You could leave, find another job. Then we wouldn't have this problem." Ethan flinched like she'd struck him. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" Aurora opened her mouth to say yes, to do the smart thing, the safe thing. The thing that would protect her company and her reputation and her carefully controlled life. But looking at Ethan's face, hurt and hopeful and heartbreakingly honest, she couldn't do it. "No," she whispered. "That's the last thing I want." "Then what do you want, Aurora? Actually want, not what you think you should want." The question hung in the air between them, and Aurora felt every wall she'd ever built trembling, ready to fall. "I want—" She stopped, swallowed, forced herself to be as brave as he was being. "I want to stop pretending. I want to stop lying to myself about what I feel. I want—" Her phone rang. Of course it did. Because the universe had a sense of timing that bordered on cruel. Aurora glanced at the screen. Margot. Calling at 10 p.m. That meant emergency. "I have to take this," she said apologetically. Ethan nodded, stepping back to give her space. "Margot? What's wrong?" "We have a situation." Margot's voice was tense. "Miranda Hale just sent an email to the entire board. She's filed a formal complaint about your conduct with Ethan Cole, citing favoritism, inappropriate workplace relationships, and compromised judgment. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning at 8. Aurora, this is bad." Aurora felt the floor drop out from under her. What exactly did she say? "I'll forward you the email. But the short version, she's accusing you of having an improper relationship with an employee and using your position to give him preferential treatment. She's got dates, times, observations. It's thorough. It's also completely untrue. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality, boss. And right now the perception is damaging enough to trigger a formal investigation." Aurora closed her eyes. "Okay, I'll handle it." "How?" I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. She ended the call and looked up at Ethan, who was watching her with concern. What happened? Aurora took a breath, then another, then told him everything. When she finished, Ethan's face had gone pale. This is my fault. If I hadn't pushed tonight, if I just left well enough alone, this isn't your fault. Miranda's been looking for ammunition since I hired you. Tonight's conversation is irrelevant. She filed this complaint based on observations from the past few months. So what do we do? Aurora stood, pacing to the window. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. City lights blurred through the glass. I defend myself. I demonstrate that all personnel decisions regarding you were merit-based and properly documented. I prove there's no inappropriate relationship to compromise my judgment. By lying, by maintaining the truth, you're my employee, and our relationship is professional. Aurora, that's all they can know, Ethan. That's all they can ever know. And us? Aurora pressed her forehead against the cool glass. There is no us. There can't be. Not if I want to save this company. What if I don't want you to save it at my expense? She turned to look at him. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll resign, effective immediately. I'll make it clear in my resignation that there was never any inappropriate conduct, that you were always professional, that I'm leaving purely for personal reasons. It removes their ammunition. Ethan, no. It's already done, Aurora. I can't watch you sacrifice everything you've built because you hired me. I won't be the reason you lose this. He pulled out his phone and started typing. Stop. Aurora crossed the room and grabbed his wrist. Don't you dare send that email. Give me another option. We fight together. We show them there's nothing inappropriate happening because there isn't. We've maintained boundaries. We've been professional. We've done everything right. Except fall in love. Aurora's breath caught. Except that. They stood there in the quiet office, hands touching, rain whispering against the windows, everything balanced on a knife's edge. What do we do? Ethan asked quietly. Aurora looked at this man who had somehow become essential to her in the space of 6 months. This man who made her laugh and challenged her thinking and loved her daughter and was offering to sacrifice his career to protect Aurora's. This man she absolutely could not afford to love. We survive tomorrow, she said finally, and then we figure out the rest. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't even a promise. But standing there with Ethan's hand in hers and the weight of tomorrow's battle settling onto her shoulders, it was all Aurora had to offer. Sometimes survival was enough. Sometimes it had to be. The emergency board meeting started at 8 a.m. sharp in the executive conference room on the 14th floor. Aurora arrived 15 minutes early, her armor firmly in place, charcoal suit, hair pulled back in a flawless bun, every document she might need organized in a leather portfolio that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd spent the hours between midnight and dawn preparing, reading Miranda's complaint 3 times, analyzing every accusation, building her defense with the same meticulous attention she'd once used to survive foster care evaluations. Back then, she'd learned that perfection was armor, that if you could prove you were flawless, maybe they'd let you stay. She'd never quite shaken that instinct. Margot was already there, setting up the presentation Aurora had assembled. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. Did you talk to Ethan? He wanted to resign. I stopped him. Margot's expression was complicated, sympathy mixed with concern. Boss, maybe that would have been easier. Easier isn't the same as right. Aurora set down her portfolio. He's done nothing wrong. I've done nothing wrong. I'm not letting Miranda Hale destroy careers based on speculation and professional jealousy. She's got the board's attention. That's dangerous. Then I'll get it back. The confidence in Aurora's voice was pure performance. Inside, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, trying to convince everyone, including herself, that she knew how to fly. The board members began filing in at 7:55. Richard Chen from Finance, always early. Patricia Morrison from Operations, carrying her ever-present tablet. James Bradford, the chairman, moving with the deliberate pace of someone who'd spent 40 years in corporate boardrooms and knew how to use silence as a weapon. Miranda Hale arrived last, her expression a careful mask of professional concern that didn't quite hide the satisfaction in her eyes. Mrs. Steele, James said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. "Thank you for making time on such short notice," as if Aurora had a choice. "Of course, Mr. Bradford. I understand we have concerns to address." "Concerns is putting it mildly." Patricia looked up from her tablet. "We received a detailed complaint from Ms. Hale regarding your conduct with employee Ethan Cole. The accusations include favoritism in project assignments, inappropriate personal interactions, and potential conflicts of interest that could expose the company to liability." Aurora kept her expression neutral. "I've reviewed Ms. Hale's complaint thoroughly. I'm prepared to address each accusation with supporting documentation." "Before we get to that," James interrupted, "I want to be clear about what's at stake here. Luminary Creative has built its reputation on professionalism and integrity. Any hint of impropriety at the executive level could damage client relationships, investor confidence, and employee morale. This isn't about personal judgments, Aurora. It's about protecting the company." "I understand completely, which is why I take these accusations very seriously, even though they're unfounded." Miranda leaned forward slightly. "With respect, Ms. Steele, I wouldn't characterize them as unfounded. I've documented numerous instances of preferential treatment toward Mr. Cole." "Then let's review those instances." Aurora opened her portfolio, pulling out the first set of documents. "Ms. Hale claims I gave Mr. Cole preferential project assignments. Here's a spreadsheet showing all project assignments for the past 6 months, organized by employee skill level and project complexity. You'll notice that Mr. Cole's assignments align precisely with his experience level and areas of expertise. In fact, compared to other senior designers, he's been assigned fewer high-profile projects, not more." She slid copies across the table. The board members began reviewing them, and Aurora watched their expressions shift from concern to consideration. "Additionally," Aurora continued, "all project assignments are reviewed and approved by Marcus Chen, our creative director. I've included his written confirmation that Mr. Cole's assignments were based purely on merit and departmental needs. Marcus had final say on team composition, not me." Richard looked up from the spreadsheet. "This does show a fairly even distribution." "Because there is one," Aurora said firmly. "I don't play favorites with assignments. It's bad for morale and worse for business." Miranda's jaw tightened slightly. "What about the late-night work sessions? Multiple employees have reported seeing Mr. Cole's car in the parking garage well past normal hours, often at the same time as yours. Mr. Cole is a senior designer on several time-sensitive projects. Late hours occasionally necessary, as they are for many employees. I've included a log of after-hours building access for the entire creative team. You'll see that at least 6 other employees maintain similar schedules, depending on project deadlines." Aurora distributed another set of documents. "Furthermore, when Mr. Cole and I worked late on the same projects, it was because those projects required both creative design and strategic oversight. We weren't alone. These sessions often included other team members. I've included email chains confirming attendance." Patricia was frowning now, but it was a thoughtful frown rather than an accusatory one. Ms. Hale's complaint also mentions personal interactions, specifically that Mr. Cole's daughter visited your private residence. This was the dangerous part. Aurora kept her voice steady. "Mr. Cole needed my signature on time-sensitive vendor contracts. I happened to be working from home that day. He arrived with his daughter because his childcare arrangements had changed unexpectedly. The entire visit lasted approximately 20 minutes and was witnessed by building security cameras, which I'm happy to provide. I signed contracts. His daughter ate cookies in my living room. Then they left." "That seems relatively innocuous," Richard said. "It was," Aurora confirmed. "It was also a one-time occurrence months ago. Hardly evidence of inappropriate conduct." Miranda wasn't backing down. "What about the change in your working relationship? Multiple employees have noted that you and Mr. Cole were quite collaborative initially, then became noticeably distant, then resumed close working contact. That pattern suggests a personal dynamic that goes beyond professional interaction." Aurora had anticipated this. It was the hardest accusation to defend because it was rooted in truth. There had been a personal dynamic, one she'd been fighting against for months. The evolution of any working relationship varies based on project needs, departmental dynamics, and professional development, Aurora said carefully. "When Mr. Cole first joined Luminary, I was more hands-on with his orientation and initial projects. As he became established, I delegated more oversight to Marcus, as is appropriate. When we encountered complex projects requiring both strategic and creative input, we resumed direct collaboration. This is standard practice for senior-level employees. But employees have commented on the change being more personal than professional, Miranda pressed. Employees comment on many things, Aurora said, allowing a hint of steel into her voice. That doesn't make those comments accurate. I've maintained appropriate professional boundaries with all my employees, including Mr. Cole. If my management style has varied, it's because different situations require different approaches, not because of any inappropriate personal involvement. James had been quiet, studying the documents Aurora had provided. Now he looked up. Ms. Hale, do you have any concrete evidence of inappropriate conduct? Witness conversations of a personal nature? Communications that crossed professional boundaries? Anything beyond observation and interpretation? Miranda hesitated. The pattern of behavior speaks for itself. Patterns require interpretation, Patricia said, tapping her tablet. What I'm seeing here is a CEO who's documented her professional decisions thoroughly. The project assignments are merit-based. The late hours are consistent with other employees. The personal residence visit was brief and work-related. Where's the actual misconduct? The appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as actual impropriety, Miranda argued. And the appearance here is clear to anyone paying attention. Aurora felt her temper flash but kept it controlled. With respect, Ms. Hale, managing based on appearance rather than evidence is a dangerous precedent. Should I avoid working late with any male employee for fear of rumors? Should I refuse to sign documents at home in case someone's childcare arrangements change? Those restrictions wouldn't make me a better CEO. They'd make me paranoid and ineffective. No one's suggesting paranoia, James said, but we do need to be mindful of optics. I am mindful, Aurora said. I'm also mindful that Ms. Hale has been vocal about her disappointment at not being promoted to senior leadership. I'm mindful that she's expressed concerns about my age and experience since I was appointed CEO. I'm mindful that this complaint conveniently emerged during the week we're finalizing next year's executive structure. The room went very quiet. Miranda's face flushed. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Steele. It's an observation, Aurora corrected. Just like yours. The difference is, I'm not filing formal complaints based on my observations. That's enough, James said firmly. This isn't productive. Aurora, you've provided comprehensive documentation defending your professional conduct. Ms. Hale, you've raised concerns that warranted investigation. I think we need to deliberate privately about next steps. Aurora nodded, gathering her materials. I'm happy to provide any additional documentation the board requires. I'm also happy to implement additional oversight structures if that would provide reassurance. But I want to be clear, I have done nothing wrong, and neither has Ethan Cole. Any actions taken should reflect that reality. Noted, James said. We'll be in touch by end of day. Aurora stood, nodded professionally to the board, and walked out of the conference room with her head high and her hands steady. She made it to her office before her legs started shaking. Margot appeared 30 seconds later, closing the door. How bad? I don't know. I defended everything I could, but Miranda's right about one thing. Perception matters. And the perception is that there's something between Ethan and me. Is there? Aurora sank into her chair. Yes, but we haven't acted on it. We've maintained boundaries. We've been professional. Except for falling in love. Except for that? Aurora whispered. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. How did it go? Aurora stared at the message. She should keep it professional, brief, distant. She should protect them both with carefully maintained boundaries. Instead, she typed, unclear. They're deliberating. How's your morning? The response came quickly. Chloe has the stomach flu. I'm working from home and hoping she keeps down the crackers I just gave her. I'm sorry. That's miserable. Part of the job description. Single dad, professional vomit cleaner, occasional designer. How are you holding up? Aurora's throat tightened. After the morning she'd had, after the accusations and the defense and the careful performance of professional competence, Ethan's simple concern felt like a lifeline. Honestly, I'm terrified. If this goes wrong, I could lose everything. Not everything. You'd still have your talent, your experience, your ability to build something new. You've done it before. That was different. I was younger, hungrier, angrier. I had something to prove. And now I'm just tired. Aurora sent the message before she could second-guess the vulnerability in it. For a long moment, there was no response. Then her phone rang. Not a text, an actual call. She answered. "Hi. Hi." Ethan's voice was warm, concerned. "I know you're probably busy, but I needed to hear your voice. You sounded not like yourself in that last text." "I'm fine." Aurora. Just her name, but said with such gentle disbelief that Aurora felt something crack in her chest. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I've spent my whole life building toward this. CEO by 32, successful company, financial security, proof that I was worth something even when nobody wanted to keep me. And now it might all fall apart because I was stupid enough to fall for someone I can't have." "You're not stupid, and you haven't done anything wrong. Tell that to the board." "I will if you want me to. I'll call them right now, explain that any feelings between us are entirely my fault, that you've been nothing but professional." "Ethan, no, that would only make things worse." "Then what can I do? Because sitting here feeling helpless while you fight this battle alone is killing me." Aurora closed her eyes, phone pressed to her ear, and let herself imagine a different world, one where Ethan wasn't her employee, where loving him wouldn't threaten everything she'd built, where they could just be two people trying to find happiness in the wreckage of their respective losses. "Just be there," she said softly. "That's enough. I'm always here. You know that, right? Whatever happens with the board, with the company, with any of this, I'm here." The words settled into Aurora's chest like a promise, dangerous and comforting in equal measure. "I should go," she said, even though she didn't want to. "I have calls to return." "Okay, but Aurora, one more thing." "Yes?" "You're worth everything, with or without the company. I know you've spent your life trying to prove your value through achievement, but that's not where your worth comes from. You were worth keeping even when nobody chose you. The foster system failed you, not the other way around." Aurora couldn't speak. Tears were pressing hot behind her eyes, threatening to spill over and ruin the carefully maintained composure she'd worn like armor for so long. "Thank you," she managed. "Any time. Now go be the brilliant, terrifying CEO I know you are." The call ended, and Aurora sat in her quiet office, phone still in her hand, and let herself cry. Not for long. She didn't have time for extended emotional breakdowns. But for 2 minutes, she let the fear and exhaustion and desperate hope pour out in silent tears that no one would see. Then she dried her eyes, fixed her makeup, and got back to work. The board's decision would come when it came. Until then, she had a company to run. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and emails and carefully maintained normalcy. Aurora responded to clients, approved budget requests, reviewed project timelines. She performed the role of CEO with the same precision she'd brought to the board meeting, giving no one any reason to question her competence or focus. But underneath the performance, anxiety hummed like an electrical current. At noon, Margot brought lunch. A salad Aurora didn't want, but ate anyway, because maintaining routine was important. "Still nothing from the board?" Margot asked, perching on the edge of Aurora's desk in that familiar way that said they were friends, not just boss and assistant. "Nothing." "That could be good. If they were planning to fire you, they probably would have done it quickly. Deliberation suggests actual consideration. Or they're consulting with legal about the best way to remove me without triggering a wrongful termination suit." Margot pointed her fork at Aurora. "That's the exhaustion talking. Eat your quinoa and think positive thoughts." "I don't do positive thoughts. I do risk assessment and contingency planning." "Which is why you're a great CEO and a terrible optimist." Margot took a bite of her own sandwich. "Can I ask you something? And I need you to answer honestly." Aurora braced herself. "All right. Do you love him? Actually love him, not just find him attractive or enjoy his company or appreciate his talent. Love him in the would rearrange your whole life for him way." The question hung in the air between them, demanding truth. "Yes," Aurora said quietly. "I do. And it terrifies me." "Because of the company?" "Because of everything. Because I don't know how to love someone and still be this person I've built. Because every time I've cared about someone, every time I've let myself hope for permanence, it's been taken away. Foster families who decided I wasn't worth keeping. A company I helped build that pushed me out when I got too ambitious. I learned a long time ago that the only thing I can really count on is myself. And Ethan challenges that. He makes me want to count on him. He makes me want to believe that maybe I could have both, the career I've built and someone to share it with. But that feels naive, like I'm setting myself up for another loss. Margot was quiet for a moment, studying Aurora with the kind of perceptive attention that came from 5 years of working together. You know what I think? I think you're more scared of being happy than you are of losing the company. Aurora started to argue, then stopped, because maybe Margot was right. Maybe the real terror wasn't the board meeting, or Miranda's accusations, or even the possibility of losing her position. Maybe it was the possibility of winning, of finding a way to make this work with Ethan, of letting herself be vulnerable and hopeful, and all the things she'd taught herself not to be. I don't know how to do this, Aurora admitted. I don't know how to be in love and still be strong. Maybe, Margot said gently, being in love is what makes you strong. Maybe letting people in isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do. Before Aurora could respond, her phone rang, James Bradford's number. It's the board, Aurora said, her heart suddenly pounding. Margot stood. Want me to stay? No. I need to take this alone. Margot squeezed her shoulder once, then left, closing the door behind her. Aurora answered on the third ring. James, thank you for calling. Aurora. His voice was professionally neutral, giving nothing away. The board has completed our deliberation. We'd like you to return to the conference room at 3 p.m. for our decision. Of course. Can you give me any indication of 3 p.m. Aurora? We'll discuss everything then. The call ended. 2 hours. She had 2 hours to wait, to wonder, to imagine every possible outcome from vindication to termination. Aurora stood and walked to her window, looking out over the city she'd conquered through sheer force of will. Somewhere out there, Ethan was taking care of his sick daughter, probably worried about Aurora's meeting, definitely not sleeping with anyone he worked with because that would be wildly inappropriate. She pulled out her phone and texted him. Board meeting at 3. Decision time. His response was immediate. I'm coming there. No, stay with Chloe. She needs you. You need me too. I'll be fine. Aurora, please, let me be there for you. Aurora's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Letting him come would be a mistake. It would only reinforce Miranda's accusations, give the board more ammunition. The smart play was to face this alone, the way she'd faced everything else in her life. But Margot's words echoed in her mind. Maybe letting people in isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do. My mom's already here. She took over Chloe duty an hour ago because I couldn't focus anyway. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't shut me out. Aurora closed her eyes, then typed, Conference room lobby, 2:45. But Ethan, if this goes badly, if they fire me or force me to choose between the company and you, then we'll figure it out together. Stop trying to carry everything alone. The words settled into Aurora's chest like stones and feathers at the same time, heavy with implication, light with hope. Okay, I'll see you at 2:45. She spent the next 2 hours in a state of controlled anxiety, reviewing documents she'd already memorized, rehearsing arguments she might need to make, preparing for outcomes she couldn't predict. At 2:40, she walked to the conference room lobby. Ethan was already there. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. But when he saw Aurora, his whole face softened with concern and something deeper, something that made her heart ache. Hi, he said quietly. Hi, how's Chloe? Asleep. My mom's got it under control. How are you? Terrified, trying not to show it. You can show it with me. Aurora glanced around the empty lobby, then made a decision. She crossed to where Ethan stood and let him pull her into a hug. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, but in those seconds, with Ethan's arms around her and his chin resting on top of her head and his steady heartbeat against her ear, Aurora felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Whatever they decide, Ethan murmured, we'll handle it. Together. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. Aurora pulled back reluctantly, aware that anyone could walk by, that this small moment of comfort could become evidence in Miranda's case against her. But she also didn't care as much as she should. Thank you for being here, she said. always. At exactly 3 p.m., Aurora and Ethan walked into the conference room together. The board members' faces were carefully neutral, impossible to read. Miranda sat slightly apart from the main group, her expression guarded. James gestured to the chairs across from the board. "Miss Steele, Mr. Cole, thank you for joining us." Aurora's stomach dropped. They'd asked for Ethan too. That couldn't be good. "We've spent considerable time reviewing the documentation you provided, Aurora," James continued. "We've also consulted with our legal team about appropriate protocols for workplace relationships and potential conflicts of interest." "I understand," Aurora said, keeping her voice steady. "We've concluded that the accusations of favoritism and misconduct are not supported by evidence. Your project assignment records are thorough and demonstrate merit-based decision-making. The after-hours work is consistent with other senior employees. The personal residence visit was brief and work-related." Aurora felt the first flutter of hope. "However," Patricia added, "we are concerned about the appearance of potential conflict. Even absent actual misconduct, the perception of inappropriate closeness could damage company reputation and employee morale." The hope flickered, but didn't die. "We've considered several options," James said, "including reassigning Mr. Cole to a different department, having him report through a different chain of command, or requesting his resignation to eliminate any potential conflict." Ethan shifted slightly beside Aurora, but didn't speak. "Ultimately," James continued, "we've decided that the most appropriate course of action is for Aurora to recuse herself from any direct supervisory role over Mr. Cole. All project assignments, performance reviews, and salary decisions regarding him will go through Marcus Chen, with oversight from Patricia Morrison. This maintains Mr. Cole's position while eliminating any potential conflict of interest." Aurora processed this carefully. It wasn't perfect. It was a public acknowledgement that the board had concerns. But it wasn't termination. It wasn't forced resignation. It was a compromise that let them both keep their jobs. "Additionally," Patricia said, "we're implementing new policies across the company regarding workplace relationships. All employees will be required to disclose any romantic or familial relationships that might create conflicts of interest. This isn't targeted at you, Aurora. It's a gap in our existing policies that this situation has highlighted." "I understand," Aurora said, "and I appreciate the board taking time to review the evidence rather than acting on speculation alone." "We also," James said, his voice taking on a slightly harder edge, "want to be clear that this decision is contingent on complete professional propriety moving forward. Any actual evidence of inappropriate conduct would result in immediate termination." "Of course," James turned to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, do you have any concerns about this arrangement?" Ethan glanced at Aurora, then back to the board. "No concerns. I appreciate you handling this fairly and reviewing the actual evidence rather than rumors." "Good." James closed the folder in front of him. "Then this matter is resolved. Ms. Hale, your concerns have been heard and addressed through structural changes. If you have further complaints, they need to be documented and evidence-based, not speculative. Clear?" Miranda's jaw was tight, but she nodded. "Clear." "Excellent. Aurora, we'll need you to work with HR to formalize these new reporting structures. Otherwise, this meeting is adjourned." The board members began gathering their materials. Aurora stood on legs that felt suddenly unsteady, relief and residual anxiety warring in her chest. She'd survived. They'd both survived. "Ms. Steele," James said as she turned to leave. "A word, please. In private." Aurora glanced at Ethan, who nodded slightly, and left the room. When they were alone, James's professional mask dropped slightly. "You're talented, Aurora. Brilliant, even. You've grown this company beyond what anyone expected. But you need to be smarter about optics. Fair or not, people watch you differently because you're young and female and in a position of power. They're looking for reasons to doubt you. Don't give them ammunition." You haven't crossed any lines yet," James agreed. "But you've been walking right up to them. I saw how you looked at Ethan Cole during this meeting. I saw how he looked at you. Maybe nothing's happened, but something wants to happen. And if you're not careful, it will. And next time we won't be able to protect you." The words stung because they were true. "I understand," Aurora said quietly. "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to make a choice between being CEO and being in love. And I need to know which one you're going to choose. Aurora met his gaze directly. I'm going to choose to be both. I'm going to maintain every professional boundary required. I'm going to document every decision meticulously. I'm going to give no one any reason to question my judgment. But I'm not going to apologize for caring about someone or pretend that love is incompatible with leadership. James studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. Good. I'd hate to see you become the kind of CEO who sacrifices everything personal for professional advancement. Those people are effective but miserable. Just be smart about how you navigate this. I will. And Aurora, off the record, if you and Mr. Cole do end up together, you have my blessing. Just wait until the dust settles and make sure HR has the proper documentation. I'd rather have a CEO who's happy and brilliant than one who's lonely and burning out. The unexpected kindness made Aurora's throat tight. Thank you, James. Don't thank me. Just keep making this company successful. That's all the gratitude I need. Aurora left the conference room and found Ethan waiting in the lobby, pacing like a caged animal. Well? He asked immediately. We survived. I can't supervise you directly anymore, but you keep your job, I keep mine, and the board isn't pursuing any further action. Ethan's whole body sagged with relief. Thank you for fighting for this. For both of us. I couldn't do anything else. Aurora glanced around the empty lobby, then lowered her voice. Ethan, we need to be more careful. James was right. We've been walking up to a line we can't afford to cross. Not yet. Not until enough time has passed and the scrutiny dies down. How long? I don't know, 6 months? A year? Long enough that no one can claim my judgment was compromised. Ethan nodded slowly, but she could see the frustration in his eyes. So we just, what? Pretend we don't have feelings for each other? We maintain professional boundaries. We wait. We're patient. And if I'm not good at being patient, Aurora smiled despite everything, then you learn, because the alternative is losing everything we just fought to protect. Or, Ethan said quietly, I could leave, find another job. Then we wouldn't have to wait. No. Aurora's response was immediate and fierce. You love this work, this team, the projects we're building. I won't let you sacrifice that for me. What if it's not sacrifice? What if it's choice? It's the same thing, and the answer is still no. They stood there in the quiet lobby, two people trying to figure out how to want each other and keep their lives intact, and Aurora felt the weight of impossible choices settling onto her shoulders. I should get back to Chloe, Ethan said finally. My mom needs to leave by 5. Of course. Give her my best. I hope she feels better soon. Ethan hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, do something else. Then he just nodded and walked away. Aurora watched him go, feeling the distance between them like a physical ache. Then she straightened her shoulders, returned to her office, and got back to work. Because that's what she did. That's who she was. A survivor, a fighter. A woman who'd learned long ago that wanting something wasn't enough to make it real. But for the first time in her life, she was starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, surviving wasn't the same as living. And if love was worth risking everything she'd built to find out the difference. The weeks that followed the board meeting settled into a careful rhythm that felt both sustainable and suffocating. Aurora threw herself into work with renewed intensity, as if proving her competence could erase the questions that had been raised about her judgment. Ethan did the same, producing designs that were somehow even more brilliant than before, like he was channeling all his frustrated feelings into creative excellence. They were professional. They were appropriate. They barely spoke to each other except in meetings with other people present. It was absolutely miserable. Marcus Chen noticed first. He cornered Aurora in the break room 3 weeks after the board meeting, coffee pot in hand and concern on his face. You want to tell me what's really going on? He asked, keeping his voice low. Because the creative team is starting to wonder if they did something wrong. Aurora poured her own coffee, using the mundane task to buy time. What do you mean? I mean, you and Ethan used to collaborate constantly. Your combined energy made everyone better. Now you won't even look at each other in team meetings, and the whole department feels like they're walking on eggshells. We're maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. You're maintaining an appropriate professional distance that's making everyone uncomfortable, Marcus corrected. Whatever happened with Miranda's complaint, whatever the board decided, it's affecting team morale. Aurora felt a flash of frustration. So what would you have me do, Marcus? The board literally restructured reporting lines because of concerns about my relationship with Ethan. I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. You're overcorrecting. There's a difference between professional boundaries and acting like someone doesn't exist. I'm not. You reassigned the Morrison project yesterday. Ethan's project. The one he's been leading for 3 months. You gave it to Sarah without explanation, without even telling him first. He found out in the team email. Aurora closed her eyes. She'd made that decision at midnight after staring at project timelines and realizing the Morrison launch would require intensive collaboration between her and Ethan. She'd told herself she was being prudent, avoiding situations that could raise eyebrows. I didn't mean to blindside him, she said quietly. Then what did you mean to do? I meant to protect him, and myself, and this company. Is that such a terrible goal? Marcus set down his coffee cup. No, but you're protecting yourself right into isolation, and that's not good for anyone. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Can I tell you something? As your friend, not your employee. Aurora nodded warily. I watched my parents do this dance for years. My dad was a professor. My mom was his graduate student. They fell in love but couldn't acknowledge it because of university policies. So they waited. And waiting turned into years of missed opportunities and carefully maintained distance and all this wasted time being noble when they could have just been happy. What happened? They finally got married 3 years after my mom graduated. And my dad said it was the best decision he ever made, but also that he'd give anything to have those 3 years back. The years they spent being appropriate instead of being together. Marcus met her gaze directly. I'm not saying you should throw caution to the wind, but I am saying that life's short, Aurora. Don't spend so much time protecting what you've built that you forget to actually live in it. He left before Aurora could respond, taking his coffee and his uncomfortable wisdom with him. Aurora stood alone in the break room, Marcus's words echoing in her mind, and wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. Not in maintaining boundaries, that was necessary, prudent, smart, but in believing that smart and necessary and prudent were the same as right. That afternoon, Aurora made a decision. She walked to Ethan's desk during the quiet hour after lunch when most of the team was at a client presentation. He looked up when her shadow fell across his workspace, surprise flickering across his face. Aurora. Hi. Can we talk in my office? Something cautious entered his expression. Is this about the Morrison project? Among other things, please? Ethan saved his work and followed her to her office. Aurora closed the door, not all the way, leaving it open a few inches for propriety, and turned to face him. I owe you an apology, she said. I reassigned Morrison without talking to you first. That was unfair and unprofessional, and I'm sorry. Ethan's shoulders relaxed slightly. I appreciate that. I've been working on Morrison for months. Finding out via email that someone else would be finishing it felt like you were being punished for something you didn't do. Yeah. Aurora moved to her window, needing the distance to say what came next. I'm scared, Ethan. I'm scared that if we work too closely together, people will talk. That Miranda will file another complaint. That the board will decide I can't be trusted to maintain objectivity. So I've been avoiding you, and in doing so, I've been hurting you. That wasn't my intention, but it was the result. I'm scared too, Ethan said quietly. I'm scared that we're wasting time we don't get back. I'm scared that being careful is just another word for being cowards. I'm scared that one day we'll look back and realize we chose safety over happiness and regret it for the rest of our lives. Marcus said something similar. Marcus is smart. Aurora turned to look at him. So what do we do? How do we be careful without being cowards? How do we protect what we've built without sacrificing what we feel? Ethan crossed to where she stood, maintaining careful distance but close enough that Aurora could see the intensity in his eyes. We find a middle ground. We collaborate when the work requires it. We're professional but not cold. We stop acting like caring about each other is a crime we need to hide. And if people talk, let them talk. As long as we're not actually doing anything inappropriate, their talk is just noise. The board said you can't supervise me directly. They didn't say we can't work together. They didn't say we can't be friendly. They set up reporting structures to eliminate conflict of interest, and we followed those structures. Everything else is just us being afraid of our own shadows. Aurora wanted to argue, wanted to list all the very valid reasons why caution was essential and distance was smart and protection was necessary. But looking at Ethan, seeing the same longing in his face that she felt in her chest, the arguments died on her tongue. "You can have Morrison back," she said instead. "I'll work with you on the strategic components, and we'll document everything properly. Is that acceptable?" Ethan's smile was small but genuine. "Very acceptable." "Good. I'll send an email to the team this afternoon." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Aurora, thank you for apologizing, for being honest, for being willing to find a middle ground instead of just building higher walls. Thank you for being patient with me while I figure out how to do this. Always." After he left, Aurora sat at her desk and drafted the email to the team about Morrison project leadership. Then she pulled Chloe's drawing from her bottom drawer where it had been hidden for weeks and placed it back on her desk where she could see it. Small steps, middle ground, learning to be brave instead of just being safe. It was a start. The charity gala loomed on the calendar like a storm cloud Aurora couldn't avoid. Every year, Luminary Creative hosted the event to raise money for local arts education programs. And every year, Aurora played her role perfectly. Gracious host, inspiring speaker, tireless networker who could charm donors into opening their wallets for a cause she genuinely believed in. This year felt different. This year, she'd be performing all those roles while knowing Ethan would be in the room, while feeling Miranda's eyes tracking her every interaction, while trying to prove to everyone, including herself, that she could be professional and appropriate and completely in control. "You need a date," Margot announced 2 weeks before the event, barging into Aurora's office with a tablet and a determined expression. Aurora didn't look up from her laptop. "I do not need a date." "You need a date. Everyone else is bringing someone. Board members, senior staff, half the creative team. You showing up alone sends a message." "What message?" "That I'm focused on the event itself rather than who I'm standing next to. That you're isolated and defensive and still dealing with fallout from Miranda's complaint." Margot set the tablet down on Aurora's desk. "I've compiled a list of acceptable candidates. Professional acquaintances, industry contacts, that venture capitalist who's been trying to take you to dinner for 6 months. Absolutely not. Or you could go with someone safe and platonic, like Marcus." Aurora finally looked up. "Marcus has a girlfriend." "Who's out of town that weekend. He already said he'd be happy to be your wingman if you need cover." The idea was tempting. Having Marcus there would provide social camouflage, someone to talk to during awkward moments, a buffer between her and unwanted speculation. It was also deeply depressing. "I'll think about it," Aurora said, which they both knew meant no. Margot sighed. "You're impossible. Just promise me you won't spend the whole night hiding in corners avoiding people." "I never hide in corners." "You hid in the coat room for 20 minutes at last year's gala." "I was taking an important phone call." "You were hiding from Richard Chen's wife, who kept asking about your dating life." Aurora couldn't entirely deny this. "Fine. I promise not to hide in the coat room. Happy?" "Ecstatic," Margot said dryly. "Now, can we review the final guest list? We've got some last-minute additions that need approval." They spent the next hour going over logistics, seating arrangements, auction items, the speech Aurora would need to deliver. It was easier to focus on details than on the looming reality of spending an entire evening in the same room as Ethan, pretending she didn't feel everything she felt. The invitation that arrived at Ethan's desk that afternoon was identical to the one every employee received. Elegant cardstock, gold lettering, the standard encouragement to attend and support the cause. But attached to it was a handwritten note on Aurora's personal stationery. Margot found Aurora in the design studio an hour later. "Did you include a personal note with Ethan's gala invitation?" Aurora felt her stomach drop. "Why? What did it say?" "How should I know? I just saw him reading something on your stationery and looking like someone had kicked his dog. What did you write?" Aurora closed her eyes, remembering the words she'd agonized over for 30 minutes before finally committing to paper. "I told him that attendance was optional, that if coming would be uncomfortable, I'd understand, that I didn't want him to feel obligated." "You told him not to come." "I told him it was his choice." "Aurora," Margot's voice was gentle but firm, "put yourself in his position. The woman you're in love with sends you a note saying, "You don't have to come to this event where I'll be." How does that read? Like I'm being considerate of his feelings? Like you don't want him there. Aurora felt panic rising in her chest. That's not… I didn't mean… I know what you meant, but intention and impact aren't always the same thing. Margot pulled out her phone. I'm texting him to come to your office. You're going to fix this before it becomes another misunderstanding in an already complicated situation. Margot, now boss, before he decides you're pushing him away again. Ethan appeared in Aurora's office 10 minutes later, the note still in his hand. You wanted to see me? His voice was carefully neutral, but Aurora could see the hurt underneath. I'm bad at this, Aurora said abruptly. At relationships, at feelings, at saying what I mean without it coming out wrong. The note was supposed to be considerate, but Margot pointed out it probably sounded like I don't want you at the gala, which isn't true at all. Ethan's expression softened slightly. Then what is true? The truth is I want you there so much it scares me. The truth is I'll spend the whole night hyper-aware of where you are in the room, who you're talking to, whether you're okay. The truth is the thought of you not being there feels worse than all the anxiety of you being there. But I also know that last year at the gala, things almost went wrong between us, and I didn't want to pressure you into attending if being there would be difficult. She stopped, breathless, aware she'd just said far more than she'd intended. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed to her desk and set down the note. I appreciate you trying to be considerate. But Aurora, I'm not fragile. I can handle being in the same room as you, even if it's complicated. What I can't handle is you making decisions about what I can or can't handle without asking me first. You're right. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing and start trusting me. Trust that I know my own limits. Trust that I can make my own choices about what I'm comfortable with. Trust that I'm strong enough to be around you without falling apart. Aurora nodded. I'll try. Good. He picked up the note. For the record, I was planning to attend anyway. I'm bringing Chloe. Aurora's heart stuttered. To the gala? There's a kids program, right? Art activities in a separate room while the adults do their networking thing? Chloe's been asking about it since she saw the poster in the break room. Something about face painting and making sparkly masks. There is. I just didn't know you were considering bringing her. She's part of my life. If I'm going to be there, she comes with me. Is that a problem? No, not at all. I think it's wonderful. Aurora hesitated, then added quietly, I'd like to say hello to her, if that's okay. Ethan's expression warmed. She'd like that. She still talks about the time she met Super Aurora, who fights bad guys with math. The nickname made Aurora smile despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. Then I'll make sure to say hello. She'll be thrilled. Ethan moved toward the door, then paused. Aurora? One more thing. You don't have to face everything alone. I know that's your default setting, but you have people who care about you, who want to help carry the weight. You just have to let us. He left before she could respond, leaving Aurora alone with thoughts that felt both comforting and terrifying. She wasn't used to having people who wanted to help carry the weight, wasn't used to trusting that they'd stay around to actually do it. But maybe that was something she needed to learn. The night of the gala arrived with perfect weather and imperfect anxiety. Aurora spent 2 hours getting ready, changing dresses 3 times before settling on a midnight blue gown that was elegant without being flashy. She wore her hair down for once, soft waves instead of her usual severe bun, and kept her jewelry simple, just the diamond studs that had been her first major purchase after Luminary Creative turned its first real profit. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked softer somehow, more vulnerable, more human. She wasn't sure if that was good or terrifying. The ballroom was already filling with guests when Aurora arrived at 6:30. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting donors and board members and clients with genuine warmth that was only partially performance. She believed in this cause. Arts education had been one of the few bright spots in her foster care experience, the one place where she'd been allowed to be creative instead of perfect. Aurora, darling, you look stunning. Patricia Morrison appeared at her elbow, champagne glass in hand. That color is perfect on you. Thank you, Patricia. I'm glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it. The auction looks fantastic this year. Did you really get Hamilton tickets? 2 seats. Opening night of the national tour. I'm hoping they'll drive up the bidding. They chatted about auction items and fundraising goals for several minutes before Patricia excused herself to greet other guests. Aurora continued working the room, accepting compliments on the venue, discussing the impact of arts education funding, performing the role of gracious host with an ease born from years of practice. She'd been there for 45 minutes before she saw Ethan. He stood near the entrance, looking slightly uncomfortable in his tuxedo, with Chloe beside him in a sparkly purple dress that made her look like a tiny princess. He was scanning the crowd, probably looking for the kids' program check-in, when his eyes found Aurora's across the room. The impact was physical. Aurora felt it in her chest, her stomach, her suddenly unsteady hands. Ethan said something to Chloe, who nodded enthusiastically, and they started making their way through the crowd toward where Aurora stood. She had approximately 30 seconds to compose herself, to remember that people were watching, to be professional and appropriate and completely in control. 29, 28, 27. "Miss Steele," Ethan said when they reached her, his formality a thin shield over the warmth in his eyes. "Thank you for hosting such a wonderful event." "Mr. Cole, I'm so glad you could attend." Aurora looked down at Chloe, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "And you must be Chloe. I've heard so much about you." "Are you Super Aurora?" Chloe asked, eyes wide. Aurora couldn't help but smile. "I don't know about Super, but I am Aurora. My daddy says you're very smart and very busy, and you fight bad guys with spreadsheets." "Your daddy is very kind, and spreadsheets can be surprisingly effective weapons against bad guys." Chloe giggled, a sound like bells that made something in Aurora's chest warm and ache simultaneously. "We were just looking for the kids' program," Ethan said. "The registration desk? Through those doors and to the left. There should be someone there to help you get Chloe checked in." Aurora crouched down slightly to be at Chloe's eye level. "I heard there's face painting tonight. Are you going to get something sparkly?" "A butterfly," Chloe announced. "A purple and pink butterfly with lots of glitter." "That sounds absolutely perfect." Aurora straightened and caught Ethan watching her with an expression that made her forget they were in a room full of people. Made her forget everything except the warmth spreading through her chest and the impossible wanting that she'd been trying to keep locked down for months. "I should let you get her checked in," Aurora said, forcing herself back to reality. "Enjoy the evening." "You too," Ethan said softly. They walked away, Chloe chattering happily about butterflies and glitter, and Aurora stood very still for a moment, trying to remember how to breathe normally. Well, that was interesting. Aurora turned to find Miranda Hale standing beside her, champagne glass in hand and calculation in her eyes. "What was interesting?" Aurora asked, keeping her voice level. "Watching you light up like a Christmas tree around Ethan Cole and his daughter. Very maternal. Very invested. I was being polite to a colleague and his child at a charity event. That's called basic human decency." "Of course." Miranda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure that's all it was." She drifted away into the crowd, leaving Aurora with the uncomfortable certainty that Miranda was still watching, still waiting, still looking for ammunition. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and carefully maintained composure. Aurora gave her speech at 8, talking about the importance of arts education and the children whose lives had been changed by access to creative programs. She told a carefully edited version of her own story. Foster kid who found refuge in art classes, who learned that creativity could be power, who built a career proving that imagination had value. She didn't mention that those art classes had been the only place she'd felt safe, that drawing and painting had been the only way she'd known how to express feelings she wasn't allowed to have, that creativity had quite literally saved her life during the darkest periods of her childhood. But the audience didn't need to know that. They just needed to open their wallets. The speech worked. By 9:30, they'd exceeded their fundraising goal by 40%. Aurora was accepting congratulations from a major donor when she felt her phone vibrate in her clutch. A text from an unknown number. "Emergency. Kids program. Come quickly." Her heart stopped. She excused herself from the conversation and practically ran toward the kids' program room, heels clicking frantically on marble floors, mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. She found Ethan in the hallway outside the room, pacing like a caged animal. "What happened? Is Chloe okay?" "She's fine, physically fine, but she's in there crying and won't tell anyone what's wrong. and the staff thought maybe you could help because she keeps asking for Super Aurora. Aurora felt relief and concern war in her chest. Take me to her. The kids' program room was full of children in various states of artistic chaos, face paint, glitter, construction paper everywhere. Chloe sat in a corner away from the other kids, her sparkly dress crumpled, her face paint smeared with tears, looking small and heartbroken. Aurora crossed to her immediately, crouching down to Chloe's level. Hey there, Butterfly, what's wrong? Chloe looked up with red-rimmed eyes. I want my mommy. The words hit Aurora like a physical blow. She glanced at Ethan, who'd followed her in, and saw the pain flash across his face. I know, sweetheart, Aurora said gently. I know you miss her. Sophie said her mommy was here, and I said mine wasn't, and Sophie asked where she was, and I said heaven, and Sophie said that's not real, and my mommy is just gone forever, and the words tumbled out in a rush of 5-year-old logic and grief. Aurora felt something crack in her chest. She knew this pain, knew what it felt like to want a mother who wasn't there, to have other children question your story, your loss, your reality. Can I tell you a secret? Aurora asked softly. Chloe nodded, sniffling. When I was your age, I didn't have a mommy either, and sometimes other kids would say mean things about that, and it would hurt so much I thought my heart might break. Do you know what I did when that happened? What? I found people who loved me and let them be my family. Not the same as a mommy, but still really special. Your daddy loves you so much, Chloe. So much that he fights bad guys every day to keep you safe and happy. That's pretty superhero-ish, don't you think? Chloe considered this. Does that make him Super Daddy? Absolutely. Super Daddy who makes sure you have butterflies and glitter and all the love in the world. What about you? Are you part of my family too? The question hung in the air, innocent and devastating. Aurora looked up at Ethan standing a few feet away, watching this moment with an expression that made her heart stop. Then back at Chloe, who was waiting for an answer with a child's perfect trust that adults would tell the truth. I'd like to be, Aurora said quietly, if that's okay with you. Okay, Chloe said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. As if Aurora hadn't just promised something she had no right to promise. As if family was a choice you could make rather than a structure you inherited. Maybe, Aurora thought, it was. Ethan helped Chloe up, and Aurora stood, suddenly aware that other parents were watching this interaction with varying degrees of interest. Thank you, Ethan said softly. I didn't know what to say, how to fix it. You can't fix grief, Aurora replied. You can just be present for it. Is that what you're doing? Being present? I'm trying. One of the program staff approached. I'm so sorry about the incident. We try to monitor the children's interactions, but sometimes things happen quickly. It's fine, Ethan assured her. Kids say things. It's not anyone's fault. They made their way back to the main ballroom, Chloe between them holding both their hands. To anyone watching, they probably looked like a family. Mother, father, daughter, dressed up for an elegant evening. The thought should have terrified Aurora. Instead, it felt dangerously like hope. They'd almost reached the ballroom when Chloe tugged on Aurora's hand. Can you stay with us, just for a little bit? Aurora glanced at Ethan, who nodded slightly. Of course, Aurora said. Where would you like to go? The balcony. I saw it before. It's pretty. So they went to the balcony, the three of them, stepping out into the cool night air away from the crowd and the noise and the watchful eyes. The city spread out below them in a carpet of lights, and Chloe pressed her face against the railing, marveling at the view. It's beautiful, she breathed. It is, Aurora agreed, but she was looking at Ethan, who was looking back at her with something that made the whole world narrow to just this moment, this connection, this impossible, perfect thing they'd somehow found in the middle of everything complicated. Thank you, Ethan said again, for what you said to her about family being a choice. Did I overstep? No. You gave her hope. You gave me hope that maybe we're not as broken as we sometimes feel. Aurora's throat was tight. You're not broken, Ethan. You're just human. There's a difference. So are you. Human, I mean, even though you fight very hard to pretend otherwise. I'm working on that. I noticed. They stood there on the balcony, Chloe between them pointing out buildings and asking questions, and Aurora felt something she hadn't felt in years, belonging. Not the conditional belonging of foster homes where she'd had to earn her place by being perfect. Not the professional belonging of the company she'd built through sheer determination. This was different. This was choosing and being chosen. This was messy and complicated and completely outside her control. This was terrifying. This was everything. "We should get back," Aurora said eventually, aware that they'd been gone too long, that people would notice, that Miranda was probably already crafting her next complaint in her head. "Just a few more minutes," Ethan said. "Please, let's just have this." So they stayed. 5 more minutes that felt stolen from a different life, a simpler life, a life where loving someone wasn't a liability and family was something you could build rather than something you lost. When they finally returned to the ballroom, Margot found Aurora immediately. "Where have you been? The auction's starting and you're supposed to open the bidding on the Hamilton tickets." "Sorry, emergency with Chloe. It's handled now." Margot's eyes narrowed. "Emergency that required you to be gone for 30 minutes with Ethan Cole?" "It required me to comfort a grieving 5-year-old who had a breakdown in the kids' room. The fact that her father was present is incidental." "Aurora, not now, Margot. I have an auction to run." Aurora moved through the rest of the evening on autopilot, performing her role with mechanical precision. She opened the bidding. She thanked the donors. She gave the closing remarks with appropriate gratitude and inspiration. But her mind was on the balcony, on Chloe's question about family, on Ethan's eyes in the city lights, on the feeling of belonging that she'd allowed herself to feel for just a few stolen minutes. The gala ended at midnight. Guests began filtering out, calling for cars, gathering coats, saying their goodbyes. Aurora stood near the entrance, thanking people for coming, accepting congratulations on a successful event. Ethan appeared in front of her at 12:15, Chloe asleep in his arms. "Thank you for tonight," he said quietly, "for everything. Thank you for coming, for bringing her, for trusting me with something that mattered." "Aurora," he stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I can't keep doing this. The distance, the pretending, the careful professional boundaries that we both know aren't enough anymore. Something has to change." "I know." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, we're stuck in this impossible situation where we can't move forward and we can't move back, and we're both just suspended in this middle ground that's slowly killing us." Aurora looked at Chloe, sleeping peacefully against Ethan's shoulder, her butterfly face paint smudged but still visible. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "I want you to fight for this the way you fought for the company. I want you to believe that we're worth the risk. I want you to stop being so afraid of losing everything that you never let yourself have anything real." The words hit like accusations and invitations simultaneously. "And if fighting for this means losing everything else, then at least you'll have fought for something that matters, something that loves you back, something that won't require you to be perfect to deserve it." Aurora felt tears pressing behind her eyes, threatening to spill over and ruin her carefully maintained composure. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Yes, you do. You're the bravest person I know. You just have to decide that we're worth being brave for." He shifted Chloe in his arms. "I should get her home. But Aurora, think about what I said. Think about whether you want to spend the rest of your life being safe or being happy. Because I don't think you can have both." He walked away, leaving Aurora standing in the emptying ballroom, surrounded by the debris of a successful evening, feeling like her entire carefully constructed world was trembling on the edge of collapse. Margot appeared beside her. "You okay?" "No, but I will be." "What are you going to do?" Aurora looked at the ballroom one last time, the elegant decorations, the evidence of professional success, the life she'd built by being perfect and controlled and safe. Then she thought about Chloe's question, about Ethan's eyes, about the feeling of belonging that she'd allowed herself to want for just a few stolen minutes. "I'm going to figure out how to be brave," she said. But figuring out how to be brave turned out to be more complicated than Aurora anticipated. The morning after the gala, she woke to 17 missed calls and twice as many text messages. Her stomach dropped before she even read them. The first text was from Margot, sent at 6:47 a.m. "We have a situation. Check the company email. Don't panic. Instructions not to panic had never once prevented panic." Aurora's hands shook as she opened her laptop, still in bed, coffee untouched on her nightstand. The email was from Miranda Hale, sent to the entire board and copied to HR. The subject line read, "Formal complaint regarding continued inappropriate conduct." Aurora's vision blurred as she read. Miranda had documented everything from the night before. The 30 minutes Aurora had spent away from the gala with Ethan, multiple witnesses who'd seen them on the balcony together, the intimate family dynamic they displayed with Chloe. She'd even included a photo someone had taken through the balcony windows, showing Aurora and Ethan standing close together while Chloe looked out at the city. In the photo, they looked exactly like what they were. Two people in love trying desperately not to show it. "Damn it," Aurora whispered. Her phone rang. James Bradford. She answered with a steady voice that was pure performance. "James, I saw the email." "Aurora, what the hell were you thinking?" His voice was sharp with frustration. Not anger exactly, but close. "We gave you a second chance. We restructured reporting lines specifically to address concerns about your relationship with Cole. And less than 2 months later, you're photographed in what looks very much like an intimate family moment at a company event. The child was upset. I comforted her. That's what happened." That's your version. Miranda's version is that you abandoned your hosting duties to spend half an hour alone with an employee you've been repeatedly warned about getting too close to. "We weren't alone. His daughter was there." Which somehow makes it worse, Aurora. It suggests a level of personal involvement that goes beyond professional boundaries. You're meeting his child, comforting his child, acting like you're part of his family. "I was being kind to a grieving child who asked me a question about belonging. Should I have ignored her? Told her to find someone else?" What exactly was the appropriate response here, James? The appropriate response was to get one of the program staff to handle it. The appropriate response was to maintain the distance you promised to maintain. The appropriate response was to not give Miranda Hale photographic evidence of exactly what she's been accusing you of. Aurora felt her temper flash. "So I'm supposed to let professional paranoia override basic human decency? I'm supposed to ignore a child in pain because comforting her might look bad?" "You're supposed to use better judgment." James's voice rose slightly, then settled back into controlled frustration. "Look, I like you, Aurora. I respect your talent and what you've built here. But the board is losing patience. We can't keep defending you if you keep giving them ammunition." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's going to be another emergency meeting. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. And this time, I don't know if I can protect you." The call ended, leaving Aurora sitting in her bed, laptop open to Miranda's accusatory email, feeling the world she'd built crumbling around her. She didn't cry. She was too angry for tears, too frustrated by the impossible situation she'd found herself in. She'd spent her whole life being careful, being perfect, building walls to protect herself from loss. And the one time she'd let those walls crack, the one time she'd chosen kindness over self-preservation, it was being used as evidence against her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "I heard about the email. This is my fault. I'm coming to talk to you." Aurora typed quickly. "No, stay away. Don't make this worse. It can't get worse. I'm not letting you take the fall for this alone. Ethan, please. I need to handle this my way." There was a long pause. Then, "Your way is shutting everyone out and trying to fix everything yourself. That's not working." Aurora stared at the message, hating that he was right. Hating that her instinct was exactly what he'd described. Circle the wagons, build the walls higher, handle everything alone because relying on other people had always ended in disappointment. Before she could respond, another text came through. "I'm drafting my resignation letter, effective immediately. This removes their ammunition and protects you. Don't you dare." "Then tell me another option, because I'm not watching you lose everything because you were kind to my daughter." Aurora's fingers flew over the keyboard. "The option is, we both show up to that board meeting and we tell the truth. Not the version Miranda wants them to believe. The actual truth. That yes, we have feelings for each other, but we've maintained every professional boundary. That what happened at the gala was a child in crisis, and two adults responding appropriately. That if being a good leader means being cold and distant, even to children who need comfort, then maybe the problem isn't with us. It's with their expectations." She sent the message before she could second-guess it, before the voice in her head that sounded like every foster parent who'd sent her back could tell her she was being too bold, too demanding, too much. Ethan's response came quickly. "That's the bravest thing I've ever heard you say. Or the stupidest. Sometimes they're the same thing. I'm with you, whatever happens. Aurora set down her phone and stared at her ceiling, trying to figure out when exactly her carefully controlled life had become this complicated. When kindness had become a liability. When caring about someone had turned into evidence of poor judgment. Somewhere around the time she'd looked into Ethan's eyes and realized that safe and happy were two different things, and she'd been choosing safe for so long she'd forgotten what happy felt like. The thought settled into her chest like a stone and a promise simultaneously. She spent the rest of Sunday preparing, not just reviewing documentation and building her defense, but actually thinking about what she wanted, what mattered, what she was willing to fight for and what she was willing to let go. By the time she went to bed Sunday night, she'd made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the kind of cold rain that felt like the universe's commentary on the day ahead. Aurora dressed in her armor, charcoal suit, hair in a perfect bun, makeup flawless. But this time the armor felt different. Not like protection from the world, but like preparation for battle. She was ready to fight, not just for her position, but for the right to be human while holding it. Ethan was already in the conference room lobby when Aurora arrived at 7:45. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept, but his expression was determined. "You came," Aurora said. "I told you I would. We're in this together." "Ethan, if this goes wrong, if they fire me, if they force you to choose between your job and me, then we deal with it, together. Stop trying to carry everything alone, Aurora. I'm here. I'm staying. Get used to it." The words should have felt like pressure. Instead, they felt like relief. They walked into the conference room together. The board was already assembled. James at the head of the table, Patricia and Richard flanking him, 3 other board members Aurora recognized but rarely interacted with. Miranda sat slightly apart, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes bright with anticipation. "Mrs. Steele, Mr. Cole, please sit." James gestured to the chairs across from the board. Aurora remained standing. "Before we begin, I have something to say." James raised an eyebrow. "We're here to discuss the complaint. I know what we're here to discuss, and I'm going to address it, but I need to do it my way." Aurora took a breath, feeling Ethan's presence beside her like an anchor. "For the past 8 months, I have worked incredibly hard to maintain professional boundaries with Ethan Cole. I restructured reporting lines. I documented every decision meticulously. I avoided private meetings and late-night work sessions. I did everything the board asked me to do to address concerns about conflicts of interest." "And yet," Miranda interrupted, "you still ended up photographed in an intimate moment with him at a company event." "I ended up comforting a traumatized 5-year-old who was crying because another child told her that heaven isn't real and her dead mother is just gone. That's what actually happened, Miranda. Not some romantic rendezvous, not an inappropriate relationship. A child in crisis and 2 adults, both of whom happened to care about her, responding with basic human kindness." Aurora pulled out her phone and set it on the table. "I have texts from 3 other parents who were at the kids' program. They all confirmed that Chloe was extremely upset. The staff didn't know how to calm her down. She was asking specifically for me because we'd had a brief conversation earlier in the evening where I mentioned that I also lost my mother when I was young. So I went. I talked to her. I told her that family is what we choose, not just what we inherit. And then Ethan and I took her to the balcony for fresh air and to calm down before returning to the event." She looked directly at James. "If that's a firing offense, if being compassionate to a grieving child is evidence of poor judgment, then I don't want to work for a company that values optics over humanity." The room was silent. Patricia looked like she was reconsidering something. Richard was frowning at the photo Miranda had provided, seeing it through different context. James leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Hale, were you aware that the child in question was in distress?" Miranda's jaw tightened. "I was aware that Ms. Steele spent an inappropriate amount of time away from her hosting duties with an employee she's been repeatedly warned about." "That's not what I asked. Were you aware that a child was crying and needed comfort?" "The circumstances don't change the appearance of impropriety." "Actually," Patricia said quietly, "I think they do. Aurora, you said you told this little girl that family is what we choose. Can you elaborate on that?" Aurora felt her throat tighten. This was the vulnerable part, the part she'd spent her life avoiding. "I grew up in foster care. 12 different homes between the ages of 4 and 17. I know what it feels like to want a family that isn't there. To have other children question your story, your loss, your reality. When Chloe asked if I was part of her family, I said I'd like to be, because that's what I wish someone had said to me when I was 5 years old and wondering if anyone would ever choose to keep me. The silence that followed was different, softer, more human. I have feelings for Ethan Cole, Aurora continued, the words coming out steady and clear. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I have never let those feelings compromise my professional judgment. I have never given him preferential treatment. I have never used my position inappropriately, and I refuse to apologize for caring about his daughter or for being kind when kindness was needed. She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. So here's what I propose. You can fire me if you believe that being human is incompatible with being CEO, or you can trust that I can maintain professional standards while also being the kind of leader who doesn't ignore crying children at charity events. Your choice. Ethan stood beside her. And if you fire her, you lose me too. Not because of any inappropriate relationship, but because I won't work for an organization that punishes kindness. James studied them both for a long moment. Then he looked at Miranda. Ms. Hale, I appreciate your diligence in reporting concerns. However, I think what we're looking at here is a fundamental disagreement about leadership style, not evidence of actual misconduct. With respect, Mr. Bradford, no, let me finish. You've filed 2 formal complaints in 3 months. Both times, when we've investigated thoroughly, we've found that Aurora has maintained appropriate professional boundaries. What you're objecting to is not misconduct, but humanity. And frankly, I think this company needs more of that, not less. He turned to Aurora. That said, we do need to address the elephant in the room. You have feelings for an employee. That creates complications, regardless of how carefully you've managed them so far. Aurora nodded. I know, which is why I've prepared a proposal. She pulled out a document she'd drafted the night before. Ethan Cole is currently a senior designer, reporting to Marcus Chen. What if he were to be promoted to creative director for our new satellite office? Richard looked up sharply. We don't have a satellite office. We've been discussing expansion for 2 years. San Francisco has been mentioned repeatedly as a potential location. Ethan has expressed interest in the past in eventually moving back to the West Coast. This solves multiple problems simultaneously. It removes any reporting relationship between us. It puts physical distance between us for professional purposes, and it allows him to advance his career without any appearance of favoritism, since the promotion would be contingent on relocating. Ethan turned to look at her, surprise and something else, hurt, maybe, flickering across his face. Aurora forced herself not to look back at him. This was the smart play, the safe play, the play that protected them both. It was also tearing her heart out. That's actually a reasonable solution, Patricia said slowly. We have been talking about West Coast expansion, and Mr. Cole's portfolio is certainly strong enough to warrant a creative director position. Wait, Ethan said. Can I say something here? James nodded. Of course. Ethan turned to Aurora, and the hurt in his eyes was clear now. You want to send me to San Francisco? 3,000 miles away? I want to protect your career and mine. This is the smart solution. The smart solution is us being on opposite coasts, never seeing each other, giving up before we even try. This isn't giving up. It's being realistic about what we can and can't have. No, it's you being scared again, running back to safety instead of fighting for what you want. Aurora felt her temper flash. I am fighting. I'm fighting to keep both of us employed. I'm fighting to find a solution that doesn't force either of us to choose between our careers and our feelings. I'm fighting to make this work in a way that's sustainable and professional and doesn't blow up in both our faces. That's what fighting looks like in the real world, Ethan. In your world, maybe. In mine, fighting looks like refusing to accept that we can't have both. Fighting looks like saying we're worth the complication. Fighting looks like choosing happiness over safety. And if choosing happiness means we both end up unemployed and miserable, then at least we'll be unemployed and miserable together. Ethan's voice rose, frustration and pain breaking through his usual calm. Don't you get it, Aurora? I don't want safe if safe means losing you. I don't want smart if smart means 3,000 miles of distance. I want messy and complicated and real. I want you in whatever form I can have you, even if that means dealing with board meetings and complaints and all the professional complications in the world." The room was utterly silent. Every board member was watching this play out like a reality show they hadn't meant to tune into. Aurora felt tears pressing behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "And what about Chloe? You'd uproot her entire life, move her away from her grandmother, her school, her friends, all because I'm too scared to fight for this the way you want me to?" "Chloe loves you," Ethan said quietly. "She asks about you constantly. She draws pictures for you. She asked me last week if Super Aurora might want to come to her school's family day. She's already chosen you as family, Aurora. The only person who hasn't chosen is you." The words hit like physical blows. James cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should give you two a moment to discuss this privately." "No?" Aurora straightened her shoulders, blinking back tears. "No, we're here to make a decision, and we should make it. The board needs to decide if they're comfortable with me remaining as CEO, given the complications of my feelings for an employee. Ethan needs to decide if he's willing to accept the San Francisco position. And I need to decide whether I'm brave enough to believe that this doesn't have to end in loss." "And have you?" Ethan asked. "Decided if you're brave enough?" Aurora looked at him. This man who'd somehow become essential to her in the space of 8 months. This man who was offering her everything she'd been too scared to want. This man who was standing in a boardroom full of people and demanding that she choose happiness over safety. She thought about Chloe asking if Aurora was part of her family. About standing on the balcony looking at city lights. About all the times in her life she'd chosen survival over living, protection over connection, safety over the terrifying possibility of being loved. "I don't know," she whispered. "I honestly don't know if I'm brave enough." The admission felt like failure and honesty in equal measure. Ethan's expression softened. "Then I'll be brave enough for both of us. I'm not taking the San Francisco job. I'm staying right here, working at Luminary Creative, continuing to report to Marcus, and making it very clear to anyone who asks that my feelings for you are completely separate from my professional performance. And in 6 months, when enough time has passed that no one can claim your judgment was compromised, I'm going to ask you on a date, and I'm going to keep asking until you say yes. Ethan, that's my decision. You can make yours. But I'm done pretending that being professional means being cold. I'm done letting fear dictate my choices, and I'm done watching you do the same." He turned to the board. "I appreciate the offer of the creative director position, truly, but my daughter has been through enough upheaval in her short life. Moving across the country would be one more loss she'd have to process. I'd rather stay here, in a job I love, with a team I respect, working for a CEO who deserves better than to be punished for having a heart." Then he looked back at Aurora. "The ball's in your court. Take all the time you need, but know that I'm not going anywhere." He walked out of the conference room, leaving Aurora standing alone in front of the board, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. James was the first to speak. "Well, that was unexpected." "I'm sorry," Aurora said automatically. "That was unprofessional and inappropriate and—" "Human," Patricia interrupted. "That was human, Aurora. Messy and complicated and completely real, which is apparently what both of you keep trying to tell us." Richard was nodding slowly. "I move that we table the formal complaint and instead focus on what actually matters, whether Aurora Steele has demonstrated poor professional judgment in any documented, measurable way. And based on the evidence I've seen, she hasn't." "Seconded," Patricia said immediately. James looked around the table. "All in favor?" Every hand went up except Miranda's. "Motion carries." James turned to Aurora. "Ms. Steele, you're free to continue in your position as CEO. The restructured reporting lines remain in place, and I strongly suggest you figure out what you actually want before someone else makes that decision for you." "I will, thank you." "Don't thank us yet. You still have to deal with whatever just happened." James gestured toward the door Ethan had walked through. "And something tells me that conversation is going to be harder than this meeting." He wasn't wrong. Aurora found Ethan in his office, staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. She knocked softly on the doorframe. "Can I come in?" He looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "It's your company." "That's not what I asked." Ethan sighed. "Yeah, come in." Aurora closed the door behind her, aware that it violated every boundary they'd tried to maintain, not caring anymore, and sat in the chair across from his desk. "I'm sorry," she said, "for proposing San Francisco without asking you first, for assuming I knew what was best for both of us, for being so scared of losing everything that I almost pushed away the thing that actually matters." "Almost? I'm still scared, Ethan. I'm terrified that if I let myself want this, want you, want Chloe, want the family you're offering, it'll be taken away like everything else I've ever cared about. I'm terrified that I'm fundamentally broken in some way that makes me unworthy of being kept. I'm terrified that one day you'll wake up and realize I'm too much work, too damaged, too—" "Stop." Ethan's voice was firm but gentle. "Aurora, look at me." She did, blinking back tears. "You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not unworthy of being kept. You're a woman who survived impossible circumstances and built something extraordinary from nothing. You're brilliant and kind and strong and, yes, sometimes scared. But being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. I don't know how to do this. How to be in love and still be the CEO everyone expects. Maybe they need to adjust their expectations. Maybe being CEO doesn't mean being perfect and cold and alone. Maybe it means being real enough to admit you care about people, even when it's complicated." Aurora felt a tear slip down her cheek. "When did you get so wise?" "When I lost my wife and had to figure out how to keep living for my daughter. You learn fast when survival depends on it." Ethan leaned forward. "Here's what I know. Life is short and unpredictable and full of losses we can't control. My wife was here one day and gone the next. I spent 2 years being angry that I couldn't protect her, couldn't save her, couldn't prevent the loss. And then I met you, and you made me want to risk loving someone again. That's terrifying for me too, Aurora. But I'd rather be terrified and trying than safe and alone." "What if we fail? What if we succeed?" Aurora laughed despite her tears. "That's not a comforting answer. It's an honest one. I can't promise you forever. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. I can't promise this will be easy. But I can promise I'll show up. I can promise I'll fight for us when things get hard. I can promise that choosing me won't be a mistake, even if it's complicated." "And Chloe? Chloe already loves you. She asked me this morning if you were mad at her because you haven't visited in a while. I had to explain that grown-ups sometimes have complicated jobs that make everything harder. She said that was dumb, and you should just come for dinner." Aurora laughed again, this time with more genuine amusement. "She said it was dumb?" "Her exact words. She's 5 and has no patience for adult nonsense. Smart kid. The smartest. Probably gets it from her dad." Ethan smiled. "So here's what I'm proposing. Not San Francisco, not 3,000 miles of distance, just dinner. This Friday, you, me, and Chloe. At our place. Nothing fancy. Probably chicken nuggets knowing Chloe's current culinary preferences. But real. Honest. A chance to see if this thing between us can work outside of boardrooms and late-night work sessions." Aurora felt hope and terror war in her chest. "Just dinner? Just dinner. Low stakes, high carb, possibly involving a 5-year-old's latest art project, and definitely involving at least one detailed explanation of why purple is the best color. Purple is objectively the best color. See? You're already fitting in perfectly." Aurora took a breath, feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump without knowing if there was water below. Then she jumped. "Okay. Friday night, dinner. I'll be there." Ethan's smile was like sunrise. "Yeah? Yeah, but Ethan, I need you to be patient with me. I'm going to be scared sometimes. I'm going to want to run back to safety when things get hard. I'm going to struggle with trusting that this is real and permanent and not another thing that will be taken away. I know, and I'll remind you as many times as you need that you're worth staying for. Deal?" "Deal." Aurora stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth. I'm glad you didn't take the San Francisco job. I'm glad you're staying, and I'm glad you're not giving up on me, even when I'm giving up on myself." "Always," Ethan said softly. "I'm always going to be here, Aurora, even when you're scared, especially when you're scared." She left his office feeling lighter than she had in months. The board meeting hadn't destroyed her. Ethan's ultimatum hadn't broken them. And for the first time in her life, Aurora was choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, being loved was something she deserved. Friday arrived with the kind of nervous anticipation usually reserved for job interviews or first dates. Aurora changed clothes 4 times, settling eventually on jeans and a soft sweater that Margot had once said made her look approachable instead of terrifying. "You're really doing this," Margot said when Aurora stopped by her desk to announce she was leaving early. "I'm really doing this." "I'm proud of you, boss. This is brave." "This is terrifying." Sometimes they're the same thing. Aurora drove to Ethan's address with sweaty palms and a racing heart. His house was in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-maintained lawns. The kind of place where families lived, where children played outside, where normal people built normal lives. She almost turned around 3 times. But then Chloe appeared in the front window, pressed her face against the glass, and waved enthusiastically when she saw Aurora's car. There was no turning back now. Ethan opened the door before Aurora could knock. "You came." "I said I would." "I know, but I was maybe 10% convinced you'd get scared and drive past the house 17 times before finally parking." "Only did it 3 times, actually." "Progress?" He stepped aside to let her in. "Welcome to our chaos. Fair warning, Chloe has been planning this dinner for 3 days and has opinions about everything from where you sit to what color plate you use." "I can handle opinions." Chloe appeared in the hallway, wearing what could only be described as her finest princess dress, purple, naturally, and holding what appeared to be a handmade crown constructed from pipe cleaners and glitter. "Super Aurora, you're here!" She ran forward and hugged Aurora's legs with the kind of uncomplicated affection that made Aurora's throat tight. "I made you a crown. It's sparkly. I can see that. It's beautiful. You have to wear it during dinner. It's the rule." Ethan mouthed "sorry" over Chloe's head. Aurora just smiled and accepted the crown, placing it carefully on her head. "How do I look?" "Like a superhero princess," Chloe declared. "Come see my room. I cleaned it special." She dragged Aurora down the hallway, chattering the entire time about school and her new friend Sophie, they'd made up after the Heaven incident, and the butterfly that had landed on her hand during recess. Ethan followed behind, watching Aurora navigate his daughter's enthusiastic welcome with a combination of amusement and something deeper, something that looked like hope taking root. Dinner was exactly as promised. Chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, and green beans that Chloe protested were too vegetable-y before eventually eating under duress. They sat at a small kitchen table, Chloe between them, talking about her day and asking Aurora questions with 5-year-old directness. "Do you have a house?" "I have an apartment." "Does it have a garden?" "No, just a balcony." "We have a garden. Daddy planted tomatoes, but they died because he forgot to water them." "I didn't forget," Ethan protested. "I was busy with work." "That's the same as forgetting," Chloe informed him seriously. Then to Aurora, "Do you like tomatoes?" "I do." "Good. Next time we'll plant them together and not forget." The casual assumption that there would be a next time, that Aurora would be part of future garden planning, made something in Aurora's chest warm and ache simultaneously. After dinner, they moved to the living room where Chloe insisted on showing Aurora her entire art portfolio, dozens of drawings, paintings, and constructions created over the past months. Each one came with a detailed explanation of what it was, why she'd made it, and whether she was proud of it or thought it could have been better. "You're very talented," Aurora said, studying a particularly ambitious watercolor of what appeared to be a dragon fighting a unicorn. "Daddy says I get it from my mommy. She was an artist, too." Aurora glanced at Ethan, who'd gone very still. "She was," Ethan confirmed quietly. "She painted murals, beautiful ones. There's one in Chloe's room." "Can I see it?" Chloe grabbed Aurora's hand and pulled her down the hallway to her bedroom. The mural covered an entire wall, a fantastical garden scene with flowers in impossible colors, butterflies with jeweled wings, and at the center, a little girl who looked remarkably like Chloe, reaching up toward a sky full of stars. "Mommy made it when I was a baby," Chloe explained. "Daddy says she wanted me to dream big dreams." Aurora felt tears pressing hot behind her eyes. "It's perfect. She must have loved you very much." "She did. Daddy says she still does, from heaven. Do you think that's true? The question hung in the air, innocent and devastating. Aurora crouched down to Chloe's eye level. I think love doesn't stop just because someone goes away. I think your mommy loved you so much that love is still here, in this mural, in the way your daddy talks about her, in all the parts of you that came from her. Does that make sense? Chloe considered this carefully. Then she nodded. You're smart like my daddy said. Your daddy gives me too much credit. No, he doesn't. He says you're the smartest person he knows, and the prettiest, and the bravest, even when you're scared. Aurora looked over at Ethan, who'd been standing in the doorway listening. He said all that? And more, Ethan confirmed, usually while trying to explain why we couldn't just invite you over for dinner every night. Every night might be excessive. That's what I told her. She disagreed. Chloe yawned, the kind of sudden exhaustion that overcame children without warning. I'm sleepy. Bedtime, butterfly, Ethan said. Say goodnight to Aurora. Chloe hugged Aurora tightly. Will you come back, for real? Not just for work? Aurora felt her heart crack open. I'll come back. I promise. Good. Because you're family now, remember? You said. I remember. After Ethan tucked Chloe into bed, he found Aurora in the living room, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Most featured a beautiful woman with dark hair and a radiant smile, holding a baby Chloe or laughing with Ethan or creating something artistic. That's Melissa, Ethan said softly, coming to stand beside her. She was beautiful. She was, still is in my memories, in Chloe, in the mural she left behind. He picked up one of the photos, their wedding day, both of them so young and happy and unaware of how little time they'd have. I was terrified to tell you about her, terrified you'd think I was too damaged, too complicated, too stuck in the past to move forward. I would never think that. I know that now. But for a long time, I thought being a widower made me less somehow, less whole, less capable of loving someone new. He set down the photo and turned to face Aurora. You made me realize that having loved and lost doesn't make you broken. It just makes you someone who knows how precious love is, how fleeting time can be, how important it is to choose happiness when you find it. Aurora felt tears spilling over now, no longer trying to hold them back. I don't know how to do this, Ethan. I don't know how to be part of a family. I don't know how to love Chloe without being terrified I'll let her down. I don't know how to love you without waiting for it to be taken away. You don't have to know. You just have to try. Ethan reached up and gently wiped away her tears. That's all any of us can do. Show up. Try. Be honest when we're scared. Let people help carry the weight. What if I'm bad at it? Then we'll figure it out together. That's what families do. Aurora laughed through her tears. Is that what we are? A family? Chloe thinks so. I think so. The only question is what you think. Aurora looked around the living room, at the photos of Melissa, at Chloe's artwork scattered across every surface, at the evidence of a life that had been built and broken and was slowly being reconstructed into something new. She thought about the board meeting, about Miranda's accusations, about all the times she'd chosen safety over connection. She thought about Chloe's crown still sitting on her head, ridiculous and perfect. She thought about Ethan's words. Sometimes being scared doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. I think, Aurora said slowly, that I'd like to try. I'd like to show up. I'd like to be part of this family you're building, even though I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'll probably be terrible at it sometimes, and I'm definitely going to be scared. Scared is okay. Scared means you care enough to worry about getting it right. Then I'm very, very scared. Ethan smiled and pulled her close. Good, me too. We can be scared together. They stood there in the quiet living room, holding each other while a 5-year-old slept down the hall and a late wife's mural watched over them from the bedroom wall, and Aurora felt something she hadn't felt in years. Home. Not the physical structure kind of home. Not the achievement kind of home she'd tried to build through professional success. The belonging kind. The chosen kind. The kind where being imperfect and scared and human was exactly enough. Stay, Ethan whispered. Not forever. Not tonight. Just a little longer. Let's sit on the couch and talk about nothing important, and be two people who care about each other without it being complicated. Everything about us is complicated. True, but maybe complicated is okay if it's also real. So Aurora stayed. They sat on the couch, drinking terrible grocery store wine and talking about movies and books and Chloe's latest obsession with outer space. They didn't talk about the board or the company or Miranda's complaints. They didn't plan or strategize or worry about optics. They just were. And somehow, that was enough. When Aurora finally left at 11 p.m., Ethan walked her to her car. "Thank you for coming," he said, "for being brave enough to try. Oh, thank you for not giving up on me when I was too scared to try myself." "Never. I'm in this, Aurora. For real. For as long as you'll have me." Aurora kissed him then, just a soft press of lips that lasted maybe 3 seconds but felt like a promise. The first real kiss they'd shared since that almost kiss at the gala a year ago. When she pulled back, Ethan was smiling. Was that professional? Absolutely not. Good. I'm tired of professional. Aurora drove home feeling lighter than she had in months, possibly years. The board might still have concerns. Miranda might still be watching for mistakes. The professional complications weren't going away, but for the first time in her life, Aurora believed that maybe those complications were worth it. Maybe being loved was worth the risk of loss. Maybe choosing happiness was braver than choosing safety. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally learning how to live instead of just survive. The weeks following that first dinner settled into a rhythm that felt both terrifying and inevitable, like learning to trust solid ground after years of walking on ice. Aurora found herself at Ethan's house twice a week, then 3 times, then most evenings when work allowed. She'd arrive around 6:30 with takeout or groceries, help Chloe with homework that mostly involved drawing elaborate pictures of space exploration, and stay through bedtime stories. It was domestic and ordinary and completely revolutionary for someone who'd spent 32 years believing she was fundamentally unsuited for family life. "You're different," Margot observed one morning, setting coffee on Aurora's desk. "Happy different. It's unnerving." Aurora looked up from her laptop. "I'm the same person." "You hummed in the elevator this morning." "You hummed. I've worked for you for 5 years and never once heard you hum. Maybe I was in a good mood." "You're always in a good mood now. You smile at people in meetings. You complimented Richard on his terrible tie. Yesterday you actually laughed at Marcus's dad joke about spreadsheets. Who are you and what have you done with my terrifying boss?" Aurora couldn't entirely suppress her smile. "I'm allowed to be happy, Margot." "You are. It's just weird seeing it actually happen." Margot perched on the edge of the desk. "How's it going with Ethan and Chloe?" "It's..." Aurora searched for words. "Complicated. Wonderful. Absolutely terrifying. Last week Chloe told me she loved me, and I had a minor panic attack in the bathroom because I didn't know if I was allowed to say it back." "Did you?" "Eventually. After 20 minutes of existential crisis about whether loving a child I'm not biologically related to was presumptuous or appropriate or..." "Aurora, did you say it back?" "Yes, I said it back. And she hugged me and said, 'I know. You tell me with your eyes,' which is apparently something from a movie they watched. And then she went back to explaining why astronauts need better snacks in space." Margot's expression softened. "You're building something real. That's allowed to be scary." "It's more than scary. It's like someone handed me something precious and fragile and said, 'Don't break this,' and I have no idea what I'm doing." "Nobody knows what they're doing. That's parenting. That's relationships. You just show up and try not to mess it up too badly." "Very inspiring." "I'm a realist, not a motivational speaker." Margot stood. "But seriously, boss, I'm happy for you. You deserve this." After she left, Aurora sat with those words for a moment. "You deserve this." Such a simple statement, but one Aurora had spent her entire life doubting. She'd believed she could earn success through hard work, could build security through careful planning, could achieve worth through professional excellence. But deserve love? Deserve family? Deserve the kind of uncomplicated affection Chloe offered every time she grabbed Aurora's hand? That was harder to accept. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Client pitch went great. Morrison project is officially greenlit. Want to celebrate tonight? I'm making my famous spaghetti, frozen meatballs, jar sauce, but Chloe thinks I'm a chef." Aurora smiled and typed back, "I'll bring wine. The good kind, not the grocery store kind. Fancy. Chloe will be impressed. Chloe is 5. She won't know the difference. True. But I will. See you at 7? See you at 7. Aurora returned to her work, reviewing the quarterly reports that would be presented to the board next week. The numbers were good. Excellent, actually. Luminary Creative was growing steadily, landing bigger clients, expanding their team. Everything Aurora had worked for was finally paying off. But now, for the first time, professional success felt like part of a larger picture rather than the entire picture. There was work, yes, but there was also Ethan's terrible spaghetti and Chloe's space obsession, and Sunday mornings that sometimes included pancakes shaped like rockets. There was life beyond the carefully constructed walls she'd built. She was so absorbed in the reports that she almost missed the soft knock on her office door. Miranda Hale stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Aurora's guard went up immediately. "Miranda, what can I do for you?" "Can I come in? I need to talk to you about something." Every instinct Aurora had screamed danger, but she gestured to the chair across from her desk. Of course. Miranda closed the door and sat, and for a long moment, she just looked at Aurora with an expression that was hard to read. "I owe you an apology," Miranda said finally. Of all the things Aurora had expected, that wasn't one of them. "Excuse me?" "I've been watching you these past few weeks, the way you are with the team, with clients, with Ethan and his daughter, and I realized something about myself that isn't particularly flattering." Aurora waited, wary. "I was jealous," Miranda continued. "Not of Ethan, not romantically, but of everything you represent. You're 8 years younger than me, and you have the position I wanted, the respect I wanted, the life I wanted. And when I saw you developing feelings for an employee, I saw an opportunity to tear you down, to prove you weren't as perfect as everyone thought. I never claimed to be perfect. No, you didn't, but you seemed to have it all, the career, the success, the confidence, and then you started to have the personal life too, and I couldn't stand it. So I filed complaints hoping they'd stick, hoping the board would see you as compromised and incompetent." Aurora kept her expression neutral, but inside, anger was building. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I was wrong. And because watching you fight for both, the career and the relationship, made me realize I've been fighting the wrong battles. I've spent 6 years being bitter about not getting promoted instead of actually building the kind of leadership the board would want to promote." Miranda looked down at her hands. "Last week, my sister asked me what I'd accomplished lately that I was proud of. And the only thing I could think of was filing complaints about you. That's pathetic. That's not who I want to be." Aurora studied the woman across from her, trying to assess sincerity versus manipulation. "What do you want from me, Miranda?" "Nothing. I don't expect forgiveness or friendship. I just wanted you to know that I'm withdrawing my complaints. All of them. I've already sent an email to the board explaining that my concerns were based on personal resentment rather than actual professional misconduct." "You did what?" "I told them the truth. That you've maintained appropriate boundaries. That your relationship with Ethan developed naturally and hasn't compromised your judgment. That I used company policy as a weapon because I was bitter about my own stalled career." Miranda stood. "I'm also putting in for a transfer to the Seattle office. They're expanding and need someone with my experience. It's a lateral move, not a promotion, but it's a fresh start somewhere that I'm not constantly comparing myself to you." Aurora sat very still, processing this unexpected development. "Miranda, I appreciate the apology, but I need to be clear about something. What you did, filing false complaints, trying to sabotage my career, that caused real damage. To me, to Ethan, to this company. An apology doesn't erase that. I know I'm not asking for erasure. I'm asking for a chance to do better going forward, to be the kind of professional I should have been all along. Seattle might be good for you," Aurora said carefully. "New environment, new challenges, new opportunities to build the kind of career you actually want, rather than the one you think you deserve." Miranda nodded, accepting the implicit dismissal in Aurora's words. "For what it's worth, I think you and Ethan are good together. I saw you at his house last week. I was driving past on my way to dinner with a friend. You were visible through the front window, all 3 of you, looking like a family. And I realized that what I'd been calling inappropriate was just human, just people choosing to be happy despite the complications." She moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. The board is meeting next week about permanent policy changes around workplace relationships. They're likely to create formal disclosure protocols and conflict of interest guidelines. You should be prepared for that conversation. Thank you for the warning. After Miranda left, Aurora sat in her office feeling like the ground had shifted again. She'd expected Miranda to be a constant adversary, a permanent source of professional anxiety. The idea that she'd withdrawn her complaints and was leaving the company entirely felt almost too easy. But Aurora had learned that sometimes resolution wasn't dramatic or satisfying. Sometimes it was just people recognizing their own mistakes and choosing to do better. She pulled out her phone and called Ethan. "Hey, I was just thinking about you," he answered. "Miranda just came to my office. She withdrew all her complaints and is transferring to Seattle." There was a pause. "Is this a trick?" "I don't think so." She apologized, said she'd been acting out of jealousy and resentment, told the board that her complaints were baseless. "Wow, that's unexpected." "Very." She also warned me that the board is creating formal workplace relationship policies. Should I be worried? "I don't think so. If they're creating policies, it means they're accepting that workplace relationships happen and need management rather than prohibition. We just need to follow whatever disclosure protocols they establish." "I can do that." "Can you?" Aurora smiled despite the lingering anxiety. "I'm learning. Slowly, but I'm learning. That's all anyone can ask. See you at 7? See you at 7. The board meeting the following week was everything Miranda had warned it would be. James Bradford opened by announcing that Luminary Creative would be implementing comprehensive workplace relationship policies effective immediately. All employees from entry level through executive leadership will be required to disclose romantic or familial relationships that might create conflicts of interest, James explained. Disclosed relationships will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis to determine if reporting structure changes or other accommodations are necessary. He looked directly at Aurora. These policies apply equally to everyone. No exceptions, no special treatment. Clear? "Crystal clear," Aurora confirmed. "Good. Aurora, given recent events, we're going to use your situation with Mr. Cole as a case study for implementing these new protocols. You'll both need to complete formal disclosure paperwork. We'll review the existing reporting structures to confirm they adequately address potential conflicts of interest. And moving forward, any major personnel decisions regarding Mr. Cole will require board oversight." It was bureaucratic and slightly invasive, but it was also fair. "I have no objections to any of that." "Excellent. Mr. Cole has already submitted his disclosure paperwork. We need yours by end of week." Aurora nodded. "You'll have it tomorrow." Richard Chen spoke up. "I want to note for the record that in reviewing Ms. Steele's decisions regarding Mr. Cole over the past year, we found no evidence of favoritism or compromised judgment. His project assignments were merit-based. His performance reviews were fair and well-documented. His salary increases were in line with other employees at his level. Whatever personal feelings may exist, they haven't impacted professional decisions." Patricia added, "We also want to acknowledge that the complications around this situation highlighted gaps in our existing policies. Creating clear guidelines benefits everyone and removes the ambiguity that allowed complaints to be weaponized." "Agreed," James said. "Any other concerns about the new policies before we move forward?" Silence around the table. "Then let's talk about Q4 projections. Aurora, you're up." The rest of the meeting proceeded normally. Financial reviews, client updates, strategic planning discussions. Aurora presented her quarterly reports with the same confidence and competence she'd always brought to board meetings. And for the first time in months, no one questioned whether her personal life was affecting her professional judgment. It felt like emerging from a storm into clear skies. After the meeting, James pulled Aurora aside. "You handled that well. No defensiveness, no pushback on reasonable oversight. That's maturity. I've learned that fighting every battle isn't the same as winning the war." "Wise. For what it's worth, I think you and Mr. Cole are navigating an impossible situation with as much grace as anyone could. Just keep being transparent, keep documenting decisions, and keep proving that you can maintain professional standards while also being human." "I will. Thank you, James, for giving me the chance to prove it. You've earned it. Now go file that disclosure paperwork before Margot has to remind you 17 times." Aurora completed the disclosure paperwork that afternoon, a simple form acknowledging her relationship with Ethan Cole, confirming the existing reporting structures, and agreeing to recuse herself from any direct supervisory decisions regarding him. It felt simultaneously invasive and liberating, making official what had been an open secret for months. She was attaching the completed form to an email when her office door burst open and Margot rushed in, looking more flustered than Aurora had seen her in years. "We have a situation." Aurora's stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" "The kind where Ethan's trying to reach you, but your phone's off because you were in a board meeting, and his daughter's school called because Chloe fell on the playground and they can't reach her emergency contacts." Aurora was on her feet immediately. "Is she okay?" "Ethan thinks so. The school nurse said it's probably just a sprained wrist, but he's stuck on a client call he can't reschedule, and I told him you'd go." "Was that overstepping?" "No, absolutely not. What school?" Margot handed her a post-it note with the address. "Brookfield Elementary. The nurse is expecting you." Aurora grabbed her purse and car keys, then paused. "Margot, I'm not listed as an emergency contact. They might not let me take her. Ethan's calling them right now to add you temporarily. He said something about how you're family, and of course you should be allowed to help in emergencies." Family. The word hit Aurora square in the chest, simultaneously warming and terrifying. She drove to Brookfield Elementary 15 minutes faster than was probably legal, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. Broken bones. Concussions. The kind of childhood injuries that seemed minor but could spiral into something serious. By the time she reached the nurse's office, her hands were shaking. Chloe sat on an examination table, her right wrist wrapped in an ice pack, tears streaking down her face. When she saw Aurora, her whole face crumpled. "Super Aurora, it hurts!" Aurora crossed to her immediately, wrapping her in a careful hug that avoided the injured wrist. "I know, Butterfly, I know it hurts, but the nurse says you're going to be okay." "I fell off the monkey bars. I was trying to go really fast and I slipped." "That sounds scary." "It was. And then my wrist hurt really bad and I wanted my daddy, but he couldn't come and you're here instead, which is almost as good but not quite because you're not my actual parent even though I want you to be." The words tumbled out in classic Chloe fashion, honest, unfiltered, devastating. The school nurse, a kind-looking woman in her 50s, approached with a clipboard. "You must be Aurora. Ethan called and added you to the emergency contact list. I just need you to sign here acknowledging you're taking responsibility for Chloe until her father can pick her up." Aurora signed without hesitation. "Does she need to see a doctor?" "I don't think it's broken, but an x-ray wouldn't hurt to be certain. I'd recommend urgent care rather than the ER, faster, less expensive, and they can handle minor fractures if it comes to that." "Understood. Thank you." Aurora helped Chloe off the examination table, grabbed her backpack with her free hand, and guided them both toward her car. "Are we going to the doctor?" Chloe asked, her voice small and worried. "Yes, just to make sure your wrist is okay. It won't take long, I promise." "Will it hurt?" "They'll probably take a picture of your bones, which doesn't hurt at all. It's actually kind of cool. You get to see your skeleton like a superhero X-ray vision." Chloe brightened slightly. "Like in the movies?" "Exactly like in the movies." The urgent care center was blessedly empty on a Wednesday afternoon. They were seen within 20 minutes, and the doctor confirmed the nurse's assessment, a mild sprain, not a fracture. Chloe would need to wear a brace for a week or two and avoid monkey bars until it healed completely. "You were very brave," the doctor told Chloe, who beamed at the praise. "Super Aurora was here. That made it easier." The doctor glanced at Aurora with a knowing smile. "Well, Super Aurora did a great job taking care of you." They were sitting in the waiting room, Chloe's wrist properly braced and Aurora filling out discharge paperwork, when Ethan burst through the door looking frantic. "Chloe! Oh, thank God, are you okay?" "I'm okay, Daddy. Super Aurora came and got me, and we saw my skeleton, and the doctor said I was brave." Ethan scooped her up carefully, mindful of the injured wrist, and held her close. Aurora watched the reunion, feeling both essential to this moment and peripheral to it, unsure where she fit in this family dynamic they were building. "Thank you," Ethan said, looking at Aurora over Chloe's head. "I was in a pitch meeting with our biggest potential client, and I couldn't leave, and I was losing my mind thinking about her alone and scared. She wasn't alone. I was there." "I know. Thank you for dropping everything and being there for her. Of course. She's... Aurora paused, searching for the right word. She's important to me. Chloe pulled back from Ethan's embrace. Daddy, can Aurora come home with us? My wrist hurts and I want her there. Ethan looked at Aurora questioningly. You probably need to get back to work. Work can wait. If you want me there, I'll be there. We want you there, Ethan said softly. Always. They drove in separate cars to Ethan's house, where they settled Chloe on the couch with ice cream, medicinal purposes, Ethan insisted, and her favorite movie. She fell asleep 20 minutes in, exhausted from the trauma and the pain medication the doctor had recommended. Aurora and Ethan sat in the kitchen, both of them running on adrenaline and relief. I added you to her emergency contact list, Ethan said. Permanently, not just for today. The school has you listed as family friend, but we both know that's not accurate anymore. What is accurate? Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. You're the woman I love. You're the person Chloe asks about constantly. You're part of our family in every way that matters. The only question is whether you're ready to make it official. Aurora's heart stuttered. Official how? However you want. We can tell everyone at work that we're together, properly together, not just having feelings we're trying to manage. We can start introducing you as my girlfriend, my partner, whatever term feels right. We can start building a life together instead of just stealing moments when the timing works. And if it complicates things at work, then it complicates things. But Aurora, we've spent a year trying to avoid complications, and they found us anyway. Maybe it's time to stop running from them and just accept that this, us, is worth whatever complications come with it. Aurora thought about the board meeting, the disclosure forms, the policies designed to manage exactly this situation. She thought about Miranda's apology and James's warning and all the reasons she'd spent months being careful. Then she thought about Chloe's face when she'd seen Aurora in the nurse's office. The relief and trust and uncomplicated love in that moment. Okay, she said, let's make it official. Let's stop hiding and start living. Ethan's smile was like sunrise. Yeah? Yeah. I'm terrified, and it's probably going to be messy, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. He stood and pulled her into a kiss that was deeper and longer than the one they'd shared in her car weeks ago. This one felt like a promise, like a beginning, like everything she'd been too scared to want finally becoming possible. When they pulled apart, Chloe was standing in the kitchen doorway, ice cream stained and sleepy, watching them with a satisfied smile. I knew it, she announced. You kiss like the people in Daddy's movies. That means you love each other. Aurora laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. You're very perceptive, Butterfly. I know. That's why I'm going to be a scientist when I grow up. Scientists notice things. She padded over to them and inserted herself between their legs, wrapping her good arm around Aurora's waist. So, are you going to live here now? Chloe, Ethan started. I don't know yet, Aurora said honestly. These things take time, but I'll be here a lot. Is that okay with you? It's perfect. Because now I have a daddy and a super Aurora, and that's almost like having a mommy, except you fight bad guys with math, which is even better. Aurora felt tears pressing behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. I'm not trying to replace your mommy, Chloe. Nobody could do that. I know, but Daddy says families come in all shapes, and you can love new people without forgetting old people. So I love my mommy in heaven, and I love you here. That's okay, right? That's more than okay, Aurora whispered. That's perfect. The 6 months that followed were a masterclass in navigating complexity with grace. Aurora and Ethan went public with their relationship at the company, not with an announcement or a formal declaration, but simply by being honest when asked. They attended the holiday party together. They stopped hiding their lunch dates. They let their colleagues see what had been obvious for months. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Marcus gave Ethan a high five and told him about time. Several team members congratulated Aurora on finding happiness. Even the board seemed pleased that the situation had been resolved transparently. Miranda's transfer to Seattle was approved, and she left with genuine well wishes from Aurora and a promise to do better in her new position. The company continued to thrive. Luminary Creative landed 3 major new clients in the first quarter, expanded their team by 12 people, and began serious discussions about opening that San Francisco satellite office, though this time they were recruiting new talent rather than relocating existing employees. Aurora remained CEO, brilliant and demanding and excellent at her job. But she also started leaving at 6 p.m. more often, started taking full weekends instead of working through them, started understanding that being a good leader didn't require sacrificing everything personal. Ethan's work flourished too. Without the constant anxiety of hiding their relationship, his creativity seemed to expand. He led the Morrison project to a successful launch and was offered the creative director position, not for a satellite office, but for Luminary's main location, working alongside Marcus to build out the creative team. And Chloe thrived. Her wrist healed completely. Her kindergarten teacher reported that she was reading above grade level and had begun explaining gravity to other students during recess. She drew increasingly elaborate pictures of space exploration, many of which included Super Aurora as an astronaut fighting math-based aliens. But the real changes were quieter. The way Chloe would reach for Aurora's hand automatically when they walked. The way she started asking, "When is Aurora coming over?" instead of "if." The way she began including Aurora in her bedtime prayers, listing her alongside her father and her grandmother and her mommy in heaven as people she was thankful for. Aurora moved some clothes into Ethan's house around month 4. Not all of them. She kept her apartment, kept her independence, kept the safety net that 32 years of self-preservation demanded. But enough that she could stay over without planning, could wake up to Chloe climbing into bed asking for pancakes, could feel like she belonged there. On a Saturday morning in late spring, 6 months after that first dinner, Aurora woke up in Ethan's bed to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of laughter from downstairs. She pulled on a robe and wandered down to find Ethan and Chloe attempting to make breakfast, the kitchen covered in flour. "We're making surprise pancakes," Chloe announced, "but Daddy forgot how to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl." "I did not forget. The eggs are just being difficult." Aurora crossed to the stove and took over egg duty, easily cracking 3 into the bowl without incident. Ethan kissed her temple in thanks. "Show off," he murmured. "Someone has to keep this family fed." The word slipped out naturally, unrehearsed. Family. As if it were the simplest truth in the world instead of the most complicated. Ethan caught it immediately, his smile widening. "Family, huh? Isn't that what we are? I was hoping you'd say that." He glanced at Chloe, who was studiously adding chocolate chips to the pancake batter. "Because I have something to ask you." Aurora's heart started pounding. "Ethan, not that. Not yet. We've only been official for 6 months, and I'm not trying to rush anything." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "But Chloe and I have been talking, and we wanted to run something by you." He handed her the paper. Aurora unfolded it to find a child's drawing, her, Ethan, and Chloe, holding hands in front of a house. Above it, in Chloe's wobbly handwriting, "Our family." "We know you still have your apartment," Ethan said. "We know you need your independence and your safety net, and we're not asking you to give that up. But we were wondering if maybe you'd consider making this your primary residence, moving in officially, being part of our everyday life instead of just visiting." "We want you here all the time," Chloe added, looking up from the pancake batter. "Not just sometimes, all the time, so we can be a real family." Aurora stared at the drawing, at the 3 stick figures representing something she'd never thought she'd have. "I don't know if I'm good at this. The everyday stuff, the family stuff. I've never done it before." "Neither have I," Ethan said. "Not this version. Not rebuilding after loss, but we're figuring it out together. And you've been doing it for 6 months already. You just haven't committed to it fully yet." "What if I mess it up? What if I'm not enough?" Chloe came over and took Aurora's hand with sticky, batter-covered fingers. "You're already enough. You help with my homework and you make Daddy smile and you know all the planets in order. That's enough." Aurora looked down at this child who'd somehow become hers without biology or legal paperwork, just through the simple act of showing up and choosing to stay. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes, I'll move in. Officially. For real." Chloe cheered and threw her arms around Aurora's waist, getting pancake batter on her robe. Ethan pulled them both into a hug, and they stood there in the chaotic kitchen, covered in flour and batter and hope. "I love you," Aurora said to both of them. "I'm still scared and I'm still going to mess things up sometimes, but I love you both so much." "We love you too," Ethan said. "And messing things up is allowed. That's part of being a family." They made terrible pancakes that morning, burnt on the outside, undercooked in the middle, and absolutely perfect in their imperfection. They ate them at the kitchen table, laughing about Ethan's cooking skills and Chloe's increasingly elaborate space exploration theories, and Aurora's admission that she'd never actually made pancakes from scratch before. It was ordinary and chaotic and completely wonderful. 2 weeks later, Aurora gave notice on her apartment. Margot helped her pack, making running commentary about how the terrifying CEO had been domesticated by a 5-year-old and a widower with terrible cooking skills. "I'm not domesticated," Aurora protested, wrapping wine glasses in newspaper. "I'm just choosing differently." "You're happy. That's what you are. And it's deeply weird, but also kind of beautiful." "Thank you, I think?" Margot grinned. "You've come a long way from the woman who hid in a coat room to avoid questions about her dating life." To be fair, Richard's wife is relentless. She means well. She just wants everyone to be as happily married as she is. Aurora paused in her packing. "Do you think Ethan and I will get married? Do you want to?" "I don't know. Maybe, eventually. The idea still terrifies me, but in a different way now. Less, this will definitely end in disaster, and more, what if I'm not good at it?" "You're already good at it. You're there every day. You help raise Chloe. You've built a life with them. A wedding would just make it official." "We've only been together 6 months. You've been in love with him for over a year. You've been part of Chloe's life almost as long. Time is relative." Aurora considered this, wrapping glasses and thinking about the future. About whether she wanted to be Chloe's stepmother officially. About whether she was ready to promise forever to someone when forever had always felt like a trap before. She didn't have answers yet, but she was starting to believe that maybe she didn't need all the answers right away. Maybe being willing to figure it out together was enough. Moving day was chaotic and perfect. Ethan hired movers for the furniture Aurora was keeping, her bed frame, her desk, a bookshelf that Chloe had immediately claimed for her growing collection of space books. Chloe helped by organizing Aurora's books into categories only she understood, explaining that science fiction needed to be near the window so the stories can see the stars. By the end of the day, Aurora's belongings were integrated into Ethan's house, their house now, in ways that felt both strange and right. Her clothes in the closet next to his, her coffee maker on the kitchen counter, her laptop on the desk in the corner of the living room that had become her workspace. That night, after Chloe was asleep and the boxes were mostly unpacked, Aurora and Ethan sat on the back porch looking at the stars. "Thank you," Aurora said quietly, "for being patient with me, for not giving up when I was too scared to choose this. Thank you for being brave enough to try. I know how hard this is for you. It's getting easier. I still have moments where I panic and want to run back to my apartment, except I don't have an apartment anymore. But mostly I just feel settled, like I finally found the place I'm supposed to be." Ethan took her hand. "I have something else to show you." He led her inside to Chloe's room, where she was sleeping peacefully under the mural Melissa had painted years ago. But on the wall opposite the mural, Ethan had hung a new piece, a framed collage of photos. Chloe as a baby with Melissa. Ethan and Melissa on their wedding day, and newer photos, Aurora and Chloe at the park. Aurora helping Chloe with homework. Aurora, Ethan, and Chloe at the company holiday party. "I wanted Chloe to see that families can grow," Ethan explained softly. "That loving new people doesn't mean forgetting the people we've lost. That her mom will always be part of our story, and so will you." Aurora felt tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect. We're not replacing her. We're just continuing, building something new while honoring what was. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay. It's exactly right." They stood there in Chloe's darkened room, looking at the visual representation of a family that had been broken and rebuilt and expanded, and Aurora felt a peace she'd never experienced before. This was home. Not the apartment she'd meticulously decorated to prove her success, not the office where she'd built her career. This chaotic, imperfect, love-filled house with a 5-year-old who thought she could be an astronaut scientist, and a man who taught her that being vulnerable was braver than being perfect. 6 months became a year. Aurora's position as CEO was never questioned again. The workplace relationship policies she and Ethan had helped pioneer became a model for other companies navigating similar situations. Margot was promoted to Chief Operating Officer. Marcus took on more creative leadership responsibilities. The company thrived. But more importantly, Aurora thrived. She learned to cook Chloe's favorite meals with varying degrees of success. She attended school events and parent-teacher conferences and birthday parties at trampoline parks that were loud and chaotic and wonderful. She helped Chloe build a science fair project about the solar system that won second place and prompted serious discussions about whether they should build a backyard observatory. And somewhere in the middle of soccer practices and bedtime stories and Sunday morning pancakes, Aurora stopped waiting for everything to fall apart. She stopped believing that being loved was conditional on being perfect. She stopped thinking of herself as the foster kid no one wanted to keep. She started believing she was exactly where she belonged. On a Saturday afternoon in early autumn, Aurora sat on a park bench watching Ethan push Chloe on the swings. Chloe had grown, taller, more confident, more articulate. She was explaining some complex theory about gravity to Ethan, who listened with the same serious attention he gave to client presentations. Aurora's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She opened it to find a message from one of her former foster mothers, the one from the house where she'd stayed for almost 2 years before aging out of the system at 17. Aurora, I saw an article about Luminary Creative and realized that's your company. I'm so proud of what you've built. I always knew you'd do amazing things. Would love to reconnect if you're open to it. Aurora stared at the message, feeling complicated emotions she didn't quite have names for. This woman had been kind, but ultimately hadn't fought to keep Aurora when the system moved her along, hadn't adopted her when that had been a possibility, hadn't chosen her permanently. She started to type a polite decline, then stopped, then thought about Chloe's question from a year ago. Are you part of my family? She thought about her own answer. Family is what we choose. Maybe that worked both ways. Maybe she could choose to let people back in, choose to build bridges instead of walls. Choose forgiveness and connection over protection and isolation. She typed, I'd like that. Let's have coffee soon. The response came quickly. I'd love that. Thank you for giving me a chance. Aurora looked up to find Ethan watching her from the swings, a question in his eyes. She smiled and gave him a thumbs up, a signal that everything was okay. More than okay. For the first time in her life, everything felt exactly right. That evening, after Chloe was asleep and they were sitting on the couch with glasses of wine, Aurora told Ethan about the message. That's big, he said. How do you feel about it? Nervous, cautiously hopeful, like maybe I'm finally ready to stop running from my past and actually deal with it. You've dealt with a lot of hard things this year. What's one more? Aurora laughed. When you put it that way, Ethan set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. Can I ask you something? Always? We've been living together for almost a year now. We're raising Chloe together. We've built a life that feels real and permanent and good. And I was wondering if you'd thought about making it official. Not right now, not tomorrow, but eventually. Aurora's heart started pounding. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'd ever want to get married. To me. To us. To this family we've built. He took her hand. I know it's terrifying. I know you spent your whole life believing you weren't worth keeping, but Aurora, I want to keep you. Permanently. Legally. With rings and vows and all the official paperwork that says you're mine and I'm yours, and we're choosing each other for the rest of our lives. Aurora felt tears streaming down her face. I'm still scared. I know, so am I, but I'm also sure. I'm sure that I love you. I'm sure that Chloe loves you. I'm sure that whatever complications come with marriage, they're worth it to have you as my partner officially. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good enough at being a wife, a stepmother, all the things that come with that? Then we'll figure it out together, just like we've figured out everything else. Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket. I'm not officially proposing right now. I don't have a big romantic gesture planned. I just want you to see this and know that when you're ready, if you're ready, This is waiting for you." He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring, a single diamond on a platinum band, understated and perfect. "It was Melissa's engagement ring," Ethan said softly. "But before you panic, let me explain. Melissa's mother gave it back to me after she died, and I've been keeping it in a drawer for years, not sure what to do with it. Then Chloe and I had a conversation about family and love and how sometimes people leave, but their love stays behind. And Chloe said her mommy would want me to be happy, would want us to be a family, would want this ring to mean love again instead of just loss." Aurora couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the enormity of what he was offering. "If you'd rather have a different ring, we can go shopping together," Ethan continued. "But I wanted you to know that this is an option, that Melissa's memory is part of our story, and that's okay. That loving you doesn't mean forgetting her, that we're building something new while honoring what was." Aurora looked at the ring, at this physical symbol of love and loss and new beginnings all tangled together. "I need time," she whispered. "Not because I don't love you, not because I'm not sure, but because saying yes to this means saying yes to everything it represents, and I want to be ready, really ready. Not scared, but trying, ready. Actually ready. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. We'll be here. This isn't going anywhere." He closed the box and set it on the coffee table between them, present but not pressuring, available but not demanding. They sat together in the quiet living room, holding hands, and Aurora felt something shift inside her. Not the fear that usually accompanied major life decisions, not the panic that something would be taken away, just peace and possibility, and the quiet certainty that eventually, when she was ready, her answer would be yes. 3 months later, on New Year's Eve, Aurora found herself at another Luminary creative event. But this time, there was no Miranda watching for mistakes, no board scrutinizing her behavior, no hiding or pretending or carefully maintained distance. Just Aurora and Ethan, dancing together while Chloe ran around with the other employees' children, and everyone knowing exactly who they were to each other. Margot found Aurora near midnight. "You look happy, boss." "I am happy. Disgustingly, embarrassingly happy." "Good. You deserve it." Margot handed her a glass of champagne. "Any New Year's resolutions?" Aurora looked across the room at Ethan, who was currently being interrogated by Chloe about whether the Earth would still rotate if everyone jumped at the same time. "Just one," Aurora said. "To keep being brave. To keep choosing love over safety. To keep believing I'm worthy of the family I've found." "That's a good resolution?" "What about you?" "To stop being surprised when good things happen to good people. Apparently, that's actually possible, despite all evidence from my 20s to the contrary." They clinked glasses and drank as the countdown to midnight began. 10, 9, 8. Aurora thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, terrified of losing her company, unable to admit what she felt, convinced that being loved required being perfect. 7, 6, 5. She thought about everything that had changed, everything she'd learned, everything she'd been brave enough to choose. 4, 3, 2. Ethan crossed the room and pulled her close. 1. They kissed as the clock struck midnight, as the room erupted in cheers and celebration, as Chloe jumped up and down yelling, "Happy New Year," to anyone who would listen. And Aurora felt it, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, that the family she'd built through choice and courage was real and permanent and hers. "I'm ready," she whispered against Ethan's lips. "Ready for what?" "Ready to say yes, to the ring, to the future, to all of it." Ethan pulled back to look at her, hope and joy and love written across his face. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I love you, I love Chloe, I love the life we've built, and I'm ready to make it official, permanently, with rings and vows and all the scary, wonderful commitment that comes with it." "Then let's do it. Let's get married. Let's be a family officially." "We already are a family," Aurora said, smiling through happy tears. "But yes, let's make it official." Chloe, who had apparently been eavesdropping, launched herself at them. "You're getting married? For real? Does that mean Aurora will be my mom?" "Stepmom," Aurora corrected gently. "You already have a mom. She's in heaven and she loves you very much. But yes, I'll be your stepmom. If that's okay with you." "That's the best thing ever." Chloe squeezed between them, creating a three-person hug. We're going to be a real family, with a wedding and everything. We're already a real family, Ethan said. The wedding just makes it official. Around them, the party continued, colleagues celebrating, music playing, champagne flowing. But in their small circle, time seemed to slow, to condense into this perfect moment of choice and commitment and love. Aurora looked at the man who taught her that vulnerability was strength, at the child who taught her that family was built through daily choices, at the life they'd created together from broken pieces and brave decisions. What began as a nearly forbidden kiss had grown into something steady and real, a family forming one careful, courageous step at a time. And for the first time in her life, Aurora wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it.